Okay, all right. Good evening. This study session of the Board of Education for March 10, 2014 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. While our study sessions are generally limited to our receipt of information from staff and discussion of that information, at times we conduct votes during the study session. Any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for playing times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PBS TV services website. At this time, we'll take public comment. Ms. Houston, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
We have one person, Greg Burrell.
Okay.
Gives you
Today's
half an
your
hour.
day. No. Oh, Mr. Burrow, let me run through the instructions. Do we have public comment on any of our other matters this evening? I know that you've been here many times, so I'm going to not run through our instructions for public comment, but to remind you that 3 lights in front of you, a green light will come on first. You have 2 minutes, a yellow light, 1 more minute, red light, time is up, and if you would keep your comments short after that, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name, of course, is Greg Burrell, B-U-R-R-I-L-L. And one of the things that I spoke about last week was the fact that I've been hearing that teachers at Roosevelt High School and Franklin High School are feeling left out of the conversation about the building remodeling. And I've done a lot of research over the past week, and it seems as though it's the intention of PPS to use designs for schools that without you getting adequate teacher input. So I'm working on this issue. I think we'll see what happens next. But this week and the next board meeting, I want to talk about, and remember, I always remind you that I just am about to finish my 9th year subbing for PPS. And I want to talk about schools that I've subbed at for years, but I'm having trouble deciding to go back to. See, this is a shame because I really care specifically about these kids. As a matter of fact, these are the kids that I got into teaching in order to help. But I'm on the PAT substitute committee, and so I hear from substitutes that they are getting no discipline support in the classroom, and the principals are trying to get them disciplined as ineffective teachers. And, you know, and then I hear from teachers at some schools that they're so frustrated they're thinking of quitting in the middle of the school year because of discipline problems and the fact that they're not getting administrative support. So today, I want to talk about Cesar Chavez, a school where I've taught every year for the past 9 years, and have had 2 days this past year that were so difficult for a sub that I've told the teachers I sub for that I don't want to come back this year. For my first year, I subbed for Janice Ingersoll, a great teacher who decided to retire early because of the never-ending mandates and the changing pension situation. I never had anything but excellent days in her classroom, the same kind of days that I expect when I go to the schools of privilege. I also, for years after that, subbed for Eric Suela, who now teaches kids that are too young for my skills. So he's a great teacher, and I always had great days. I talked with one of the strongest teachers I know at Cesar Chavez, and he tells me that the principal and the vice principal are very good. So why don't I want to go back? I think the last time I was there, most of the staff was out being trained, and without those core teachers that the kids know, they were having a field day sinking the subs. And so it's this kind of problem that really makes me worry. Perhaps you don't see what's happening as a result of some of the budget cuts and the mandates and the training and the principals being out of the building. But this is my next area that I want to bring to your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the next thing on our agenda is a discussion of the 10 Great Fields Project Plan and Financing Program. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I
would be happy to, and I'm going to invite Tony Magliano, who is our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and David Wind, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer. Come on down. And Julia Brim Edwards, our partner from Nike.
Good evening, board chairs, board directors, superintendent. My name's Tony Magliano. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer. With me tonight, Julia Brim Edwards, strong partner in our great fields, Nike, and Julia has a lot of history about this project dating back to the early 2000s. We're here this evening with a draft resolution that recommends completing our remaining high school track and fields using the construction excise tax as an internal funding mechanism. At this time, I'm going to ask Julia to talk about the history and benefits that these fields provide to the community.
Great, thanks, Tony. I'm Julia Brim Edwards. I'm the Global Director for Government and Public Affairs at Nike, former Portland Public School Board member, parent of 3 kids who are students or alumni of Portland Public Schools, and also a 6-sport athlete from the PIL. So long history playing on fields in Portland Public Schools. And I was just asked to provide a quick history of the Fields Project. So we call it it started as a 10 Greats Fields Project. It's kind of morphed into the Places for Sports. But thought I'd talk just briefly about vision, benefit to the community, what's been done, how to get over the finish line. So the vision, I'm going to take you back to the early 2000s. And at the time, when I first got on the board, there was this really cool project happening with the electricians, some community partners. They wanted to light the fields at Cleveland, Roosevelt, and Marshall. And, I'm going to tell a little bit of the story through the history of T-shirts, because this was the Cleveland Friday Night Lights, first time they'd ever had a football game under the lights, 2004. They were shortly followed by the Marshall High School field lighting. And then after that, the community energy that came about from having communities have a place to gather, whether it was Friday night or a Tuesday night soccer game, really spread across the district, and individual school communities started talking about raising money to put in sort of year-round artificial turf fields and tracks. And Lincoln was the one that first successfully raised the community funds to put in an artificial turf and field. And then shortly after that, Cleveland and Grant were planning their community fundraising. And as a board member at the time and the parent of students in PPS, it looked like we were going to end up only with fields in those parts of town that could afford to raise the money. So a real equity issue for our high school communities. And if you've been to one of these fields where there's a great game going on, you know kind of what community building the potential it could have. So it was clear that if every student in a PPS high school were to have access to an artificial turf field, that we need to have a community-wide effort versus just having a school-based effort. So at the time, working with Pam Brown, who was the director of facilities, we pulled together a number of community partners, Oregon Sports Authority, Nike, I wasn't there at the time, PIL alums, the Portland Parks Commissioner, at the time it was Dan Saltzman, and then parents of student athletes. And from this, sort of these community conversations, we created sort of the 10 Great Fields Project. And the goal was that every high school student, no matter where you lived in the city, you were going to have access to a high quality turf field. So what have we done? If you could, well, first of all, let me just talk about the community benefits. As you all know, and I know some of you have been to the field dedications, that these fields serve as community gathering places. Certainly in the Northwest, where there's lots of rain, it greatly expands the amount of time that kids can play on the field. So whether it's PE classes or sports, having an artificial turf field allows you to basically use it year-round, so lots more opportunities for kids. The other thing, the phenomena, if you talk to parents who had kids active in sports, a lot of times they were, at the end of the school day, leaving Portland Public Schools and driving to Gresham, Hillsborough, Beaverton, where kids had the opportunity to play on a field year-round. So if you want to do placemaking and create places for our kids in our own communities in every neighborhood, we really needed to do something about it. And I will say, so what have we done over the last 10 years? And based on the partnership of Portland Public Schools, Portland Parks, the city commissioners, Nike, and school communities, we've knocked out 5 fields. So 5 fields have been completed, about $6 million have been raised, and in 2006, I want to say, the school board created the, Director Regan would know this, the Great Fields Fund. Was it 2006? Okay. Created the Great Fields Fund and an equity formula so that PPS could provide support to the project. In addition, there was these ongoing strong partnerships built between PPS and the community. And the fields that have been done, Buckman and Benson, that was a collaboration between the city and the school district, PCU, St. Mary's, I mean, really a broad partnership. Cleveland High School, that was one of the first ones. Again, PPS provided in-kind services, city put money in, Nike had a substantial stake in that. Lincoln has been done twice now. Roosevelt, this is one of my favorite field projects. It was a several-year-long community fundraising, friend-raising effort, and the night that they had the field opening, you could just tell it was going to be a game changer for the community, and a really important support to what was happening inside the building in the classrooms, to also have kids have an opportunity in other ways to express themselves and be proud of their school and their community. And then most recently, Grant High School, again, a collaboration between the city, the school district, Nike, community partners, and one thing I'd say about the grant project is the grant project started before I was even on the school board. So I think in 2002 they had their first meeting, and it took almost 12 years of fundraising for the grant community to be able to afford the field. And so I'd say if you look at the work that was put together and the partnerships that were built, and you think about how are we going to get across the finish line, we had a great conversation with the superintendent and Director Belisle about finishing off the project so that the vision of every kid in every community in every neighborhood having access to a field, we needed to accelerate the progress. So Nike has said that we'll, assuming the school district is prepared to move forward, we have another 700. We've put $1.7 million into the field to date, but we have another 700,000 to put into the projects, and working also with the city to also contribute. So we'd hope that the board would look favorably on the resolution tonight. It's been a great partnership going forward, and if you look at the schools that are remaining, these are in communities that all would benefit from having a great asset in their own backyard. And so I think that I have a bunch of the shirts from all the different openings, but I think the one that I'd want to leave you with is the one from Wilson, which is the one that's not yet done, and it's Dream of Fields. So you got to know that a lot of student athletes, isn't it great? It's, a lot of student athletes in this city, and just a lot of students and community members are dreaming of fields, and you guys can make it happen, and it's a great thing for the board and the district to be able to do for students in the broader community. So hopefully you'll look favorably on the resolution. So game on.
And actually, before Tony starts, I just want to say a huge thank you to Julia again for being with this project all the way through and part of actually bringing other partners to the table and really helping us come up with a strategy of how do we bring this to completion so every student has access to a field. But Julia, you've been awesome as a partner and through this entire effort. Thank you.
I assume I need to keep working till it's finished.
Yes.
Thank you, Julia.
Do you want me to leave?
Marshall's gonna come down so you can ditch me.
Okay.
So like Julia said, this effort began 10 years ago, and it began as a grassroots effort where our high schools were left to fundraise and work on their own to get these fields done, working with their communities to fundraise, and really only 2 high schools were successful, Cleveland and Lincoln. In 2008, like Julia said, the board district recognized that it wasn't progressing, and that was why the board adopted Resolution 3896 that set aside $2 million to help kickstart these projects. That effort, along with the effort of many of the partners that we have, enabled the completion of Benson High School Field, the Buckman Field, which is Parks owned, the Roosevelt High School Track and Field, the Grant High School Track and Field, which is also Parks owned, replacing the Lincoln Field and resurfacing the Madison Track. A few before and after shots here. You can see an aerial of Grant High School and what that field looks like today. An aerial of Roosevelt and what that field looks like today. So where does that leave us? There are still projects remaining, and these are some of our most underserved communities. Jefferson High School Field and Track, Madison High School Field, Marshall High School Field, and Wilson High School Field. While we continue to work with our partners to include the City of Portland on our fundraising efforts, we believe that we've reached as deep as we can reach with our partners. The cost to complete the remaining fields is approximately $7.2 million. Our partners have contributed about $1.5 million, leaving a gap of about $5.2 million. And that's pending any further contributions from the city. Designs are nearly complete, and the timeline would be to construct these remaining 4 fields over this summer. Staff has met with each city commissioner, Parks and Recreation, and the mayor. While there is great support from all, it's too early in their budget cycle to know whether or not there's additional funding to help support the remaining fields. So why now? I've asked Marshall, our district athletic director, to come up and help with answering part of that question and some of the other benefits that it provides to the athletics and our students.
Hello, everybody. I'm Marshall Haskins. Thanks for all the work you do. I'm excited, and I guess I'll start with the fact that all 3 of the schools that are in play here are schools that I worked at, so I'm a little nervous as to, you guys, no one did the schools I worked at, Tony, so that's not good. But on another note, I just think of the opportunity that I had to be at the grand opening of the Grant Field and the excitement that community had. Yes, Grant's a big school, they've had success in athletics, but I had never seen them that excited or elated, and the whole community coming out. And the little kids coming out from the different schools, middle schools out there on the track and that. And that just is kind of a microcosm of what happens in districts where when we get turf. But for us, simple things, we have a situation where kids are choosing schools, whether they want to go to our public schools or our private schools. And a lot of kids and families choose it based on facilities. So when I have kids who are telling me they're going to go to Central Catholic because they had turf prior to Grant getting it, and now Grant has turf. But I have the same issue in the Wilson community where kids want to go to Lincoln instead of Wilson, or go to Jesuit instead of Wilson because Wilson doesn't have turf. And to us as adults, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but to them, that's huge. That's huge. It also shows the investment that we're making in Portland Public Schools as it relates to athletics. Our facilities have been less than competitive, and so just a commitment to have fields across the board will be great. And then when I think about the communities, our low-income communities, 3 of the 4 fields are in those communities. And when we talk about equity and the fact that we want to make sure all of our kids have equitable access to normalize equal facilities, the fact that 3 of these communities are the 3 other communities are low-income communities suggests that we should make a commitment to have that. What does that mean for those communities? When I look at soccer across our city, I could go to turf fields and show you the just rated right down. You go to top ones who got turf, they're the best soccer programs we have. When I think about the number of kids who have youth football or youth soccer and those kind of things, it's the places that have more time for kids to be on the field practicing. Just left a meeting today with the Franklin athletic director, and he was saying how he's really excited to get turf in this year that they have to wait, because if they have it in March, so the following year would be great. But this year he's concerned that the football field's not gonna last. So people wanna rent the field, and he's like, it's in April, and I gotta keep people off my field to be able to have my field in play for September. We're 4 or 5 months away, and we're already thinking a deficit model that our kids can't use our fields, or our community can't use our fields because they're gonna be muddy, because it's raining already, it's gonna be muddy, so we gotta try to protect it. Which then leads to another thing, that just what it really means to a community. I think about Lincoln and the fact that we have the hardest time having access to renters for Lincoln's field. But it's because the band uses the field, the cheerleaders use the field, the choir uses the field, lacrosse, which is a club sport, uses the field, rugby uses the field, all the youth sports want to use the field. It becomes a hub for everyone in that community because it's a place where we know there's going to be accessible because it's turf versus the mud. And then the last thing I'll say is, when we think about having games, and you can go to a game on grass, or you go to a game on turf, when you go to a game where there's turf field, it's like the whole thing comes alive. And I don't know why, because you would think it would be just as electric, but it seems like there's more electricity in the environment because it just looks so good. I was at the Roosevelt State Tournament game against Ashland, and it was just so neat that the people from Ashland came, and we had a high-quality environment for them to be in. Not that it wouldn't have been good at Wilson, it wouldn't have been good at Franklin, but it was unbelievable at Roosevelt because they came to a low socioeconomic place, and they were expecting something less than, and they got a Cadillac model of what a football facility should look like. So that's what it would do for us athletically.
Thank you, Marshall. Before David Wine's coming down to present the funding plan, the 2 questions we're asking the board to consider are whether you concur with the plan to complete these fields and whether you concur with the funding mechanism we're presenting. Before David gets started, I wanted to just throw up, if approved, on March 31st, that we would come back. If approved, in total, the completion of all of these fields is around $15 million. And our partners have contributed, or will have contributed, 46% of that cost. So it's been a huge undertaking by the community to get us, as Julia said, to the finish line.
Thank you. Co-Chair Knowles, board members, Superintendent Smith, I'm David Wine, I'm the Deputy Chief Financial Officer and the Budget Director, but I'm also a soccer coach. So before I talk about financing, let me just tell you a simple story about what a difference a turf field makes. I coach a U13 girls team, and on Saturday we held our first practice of the spring season at Grant High School on the field. It was raining. The good news was that we left that field in just as good condition at the end of an hour and a half on the turf field as it was when we got there. If that had been a grass field, I wouldn't have taken the girls onto the field because we would have cut it up and I'd have been in trouble with someone for using it. You can play games all weekend, and the people who play at 4:30 or 5 o'clock on Sunday have just as good an experience as the people who play at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. And the sense of pride it engenders in the kids is pretty amazing. These girls actually played in a tournament game on that field in the fall, and most of the girls on this team are students who will go to Grant High School, and they'd never played on the field before in the fall. And when they stepped out on that field for the first time, they looked around and they were totally thrilled at how cool it was. In fact, there was one kid on the team whose sister played JV at Grant, and the field was new enough that the JV soccer team hadn't played on it yet. And her younger sister, who was playing rec soccer for PCU, got to play on the Grant field before the older sister, which caused quite a dispute in that family. But it really does make a difference. If you have a field like this, you can have club teams, you can have high school teams. The club teams feed the high school programs. So, one of the things Marshall's going to be talking about later is how you build a feeder system for high school sports. These fields really do make a difference. So, $7 million is what it's going to take to finish the fields up. We have just over $7 million. We've got a couple of $1 million already earmarked from partners. We need $5.2 million. The recommendation before you is to use funds from the Construction Excise Tax Fund to pay for the completion of this work. We have, as some of you may know, the board adopted the capital asset. We have enough money in the CET fund to do this. That's the first thing to tell you. When the board adopted the capital asset renewal plan, which is the plan to make sure we have enough money on hand to take care of the capital maintenance for the new school buildings that we're constructing, one of the things that the board did was to earmark a portion of the proceeds from the construction excise tax to be the funding for that capital asset renewal plan. So a portion of the balance of the CET fund is dollars that are earmarked for that capital asset renewal plan. This proposal is actually going to draw some of those earmarked funds and use those in the short term to complete this work. The reason we can do that is because the majority of those earmarked funds are not needed in the next several years, and the income that we're going to be collecting each year on the construction excise tax is going to be enough to sort of replenish that earmarked portion of the funds. So the $5.2 million, $3.5 million comes from that sort of earmarked balance, and 1.7 is from the uncommitted CET money. We've been setting aside $1.5 million of the CET money each year. What we do is increase the amount we set aside from 1.5 to $2.2 million each year to make sure that 5 years from now, we've still got the money available for the capital asset renewal plan that we need. One of the questions that I saw earlier in the day is, what does this do for other money available through the CET fund? We expect that this year and next year we will collect somewhere between $3 and $3.4 million each year from the CET. And exactly how much we collect has been increasing in the last couple of years because this is a fee on new real estate development activity. And so as the economy has recovered, our revenue stream has picked up. If you approve the resolution and approve this work, $2.2 million of that annual revenue stream is going to be earmarked for the capital asset renewal plan. So if we collect $3.4 million like we're forecasting, that would leave $1.2 million available for other capital projects. And the CET money has to be used for capital. We can't hire teachers with it. We can't buy textbooks with it. It has to be for capital projects. So again, if this plan is approved, we estimate that we'll have about $1.2 million of additional CET money available for other projects. And if the revenue goes up per year. And we've got, And we'll have a carry forward balance of just over $1 million as well going forward.
Questions?
Okay, just to remind everybody that the two questions that staff is mostly looking to us for have to do with support for the completing the Great Fields generally, and then also support for the funding plan. So questions related to those?
We have questions of these gentlemen.
Yes, right now.
Can I ask them?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Director Buell.
It's probably not a very popular question, but Marshall High School, I thought it was closed. We're going to put some people out there, evidently, for a couple of years. So why are we putting a new field out there? We've had we've had high schools who've lasted for 100 years without
Yes, sir.
without a field. Can't we run 2 or 3 years without the field and save $1.6 million to put someplace else? I mean, how does that all come down?
So
What's the
Marsh-
thinking? What's the thinking behind that?
So Marshall will be a swing site. So Franklin will be at Marshall. We've worked with the community there, and they would like to come back to Franklin and have a brand-new field to play on. So while they're at Marshall, they'll be playing on a field, they'll have a home field. It's likely that may be the same place another high school may end up. So over the next 10 years, we'll have high school students at Marshall, and they'll have a home field to play on.
Franklin's going to Marshall.
Correct.
Then who's going to go? Grant's going to Marshall? For how long?
They'll each be there for 18 months to 2 years.
And then who goes next?
That will be up to the board's decision soon.
We have to get another bond in order to have anybody
Correct.
else go. So essentially, we're putting in a field for, the community is the,
That's an element of it. The community, we have a lot of partners that are willing to, that are also partnering and giving us money to get the field built. And they're also willing to play on the field at Marshall as well. So pay to play, which would help sustain us having a field there.
pay to play?
Yes.
Do you have to pay to play at Grant now?
Grant is a park zone field, so we don't program Grant.
Buckman, you pay to play?
Buckman. Buckman's also a park zone field.
Lincoln, you pay to play?
Lincoln, you pay to play. Roosevelt, you pay to play, unless you're a school-based athletics. But any of our partners that come in, a soccer league, youth football, they pay.
How do we decide who pays?
Um,
If it's a park department thing, you don't have to pay? Grant's Park Department, you said, had some park department backing, you don't, is that why
I
you
think
don't pay at Grant?
Parks has a fee that they establish on their fields that they charge users. We don't even program those fields for users. They give us hours for our athletics that we don't pay for, and then they program the use of that field outside of that. So we don't place anybody out on those fields to play.
And that's because the city owns those fields. So that's how it was decided, is that the Buckman Field and Grant Field are on city land.
We can't get the city to about, do the Marshall Field, since we don't even have a school there?
Well, the city has been a big contributor to us getting our fields done. They've contributed, I think, close to a little over $500,000 around there, and we're asking them to contribute toward the
Marshall?
completion of these fields. That includes Marshall.
That includes Marshall, it is Marshall.
It includes Marshall, Jefferson, Wilson, and Madison fields. We've asked for the city to contribute to the completion of those fields as well. They haven't answered us yet.
And Director Buell, the other thing is, we actually program Marshall right now. So Benson practices at Marshall because after school, there's a small window that they can use that because it's Park Bureau. So it was already rented out to someone else. We have freshman JV games, freshman JV football, soccer games there at Marshall. And then during the spring, we have track there. year-round, and then our youth sports will be using that site as well. So it's programmed fully. It's just as much as any of our high schools currently, the Marshall site.
Okay, that's a good answer, thank you. Have another
Director Regan?
So I wanted to start by acknowledging a few folks. First of all, 2 former school board members. Julia has been absolutely amazing in supporting this project, and also she was the coordinator with the Blazers on getting all of our high school gym floors redone, and that has made a huge difference also in terms of student safety and pride, I think, as well. And I talked to Trudy today, Trudy Sargent, to let her know that we're finishing this project, because once Julia left the board, I think Trudy kind of took it up. So I just want to acknowledge and thank both of you for staying so involved and engaged, and Julia in particular in terms of so much effort in this area. I also want to just for tonight, I also want to thank our state legislature, because a construction excise fee came about a couple of years ago. They passed that, and they allowed school districts to assess this fee. And it's on any new living spaces that are built. There's a small fee applied, and then school districts could actually collect that. With the idea that it has, every time you add living space, it has some impact on schools and public spaces like this, and there should be some sort of a charge assessed for that. The reason that they did that is because in Oregon, we have system development fees, most states do, but in Oregon, the system development fees don't cover public education and public school facilities. So when you build a new development anywhere in Oregon, you pay system development fees as the developer for things like water lines and sewer and street lighting and all kinds of things. And it's absolutely crazy that you don't include public school buildings in that, because you have so many, you plop 2,000 houses in a development and the school district is left to fend for itself. So I think the construction excise tax was an effort by the legislature to try to kind of help school districts with facility needs. And it's very clear that the construction excise tax can only be used on facilities. It can't be used on teachers. And so I'm incredibly grateful that we have this source of funding. It's much smaller than what would happen in a system development fee, but it does allow us to do some work, very needed maintenance and upgrades. So it's exciting that we have this fee that we can tap into for these projects. So thank you to the state legislature for their wisdom in doing that. I guess one of the things I just want to say is I'm a huge supporter of this project, especially because in Portland, Oregon, it rains all the time, and this allows us to pretty much program these fields year-round. It seems that every school that's added turf fields, and there's been a couple of elementary schools also who have added turf fields of late. One I know was in recognition of a teacher who passed away, one was in recognition of a student who passed away, and it just makes such a difference for the whole community and community engagement and involvement and community access year-round. I also think that certainly sports like theater, like music, band, are something that just keep kids engaged and keep them in school, and anything that we can do to support our kids academically, and this is one thing that I think does, I'm wildly supportive of. And I think the final thing is that I think these fields really do help us both attract students to Portland Public Schools. They're sort of one of those first impression visuals for community members in terms of community pride. I think they keep our alumni somewhat tied in and engaged. But mostly it's just an incredible community building opportunity. So I'm very supportive of us starting and finishing this project, and grateful to everyone involved.
Dr. Curler?
Sure. Couple questions. One is just, how long do these fields last?
Approximately 8 to 10 years is our planning factor for them. It depends a lot on use. We got just about 10 years out of the Lincoln field, and that was the first field we've done. We're planning on Cleveland in 2018-19 timeframe.
So when you redo them, it's cost the same? I mean, other than, inflation, I mean, is it cheaper to redo them than to put a new one in?
Right, so the
Yeah.
planning, what we use for planning is, typically you don't have to do the sub-base
Right.
when you replace it
Yeah.
the first time. The second time, because of drainage and silt and things like that, you may have to scrape it. So it's likely that the second time you replace it, the cost could be near what it would cost to put it in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So is it basically a 10-year cycle?
Correct.
And have we built that into that's built into our maintenance budgets?
It's built into our capital asset
Yeah.
renewal plan.
Okay. Okay.
And field revenues go into that plan.
Yeah.
So the revenue we generate off of paying users is earmarked to go toward the replacement of fields.
Okay. So I was just looking at that graph. That's a great graph, so congratulations to everybody involved. That really speaks volumes, I think. Where are we exactly with the City of Portland? We've talked to everybody, and so they'll get back to us. Does this proposal assume something from them? Assumes nothing from them?
This proposal assumes nothing, so.
Should we leave a little bit for them, just let them?
We can very easily not use as much of our money if we get money from them.
I guess I can mention that, again, staff and I and Julia met with each of the commissioners and the mayor, and they're all very well aware of this, but they have their own budgeting process to go through, similar to us. So as Julia pointed out in the beginning, Commissioner Saltzman was the first one to start this project with us, and so there's been a long line of parks folks that have been really supportive of this, even though much of the money didn't come from parks. So I'm hopeful they're very well aware of it, but of course, just like we do, we have hard decisions, they have hard decisions. But I would guess that if they're able to come through as partners, then our borrowing from our own fund would be less.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
So I had been under the impression that in the bond money, there was also money for the field at Marshall. Is that not true?
Marshall was not, we didn't consider that a bond school. But Grant was paid for through our capital program, as well as Franklin will be.
But there is money in the bond program to upgrade Marshall,
Yeah.
which is what you're
Right.
referring to.
Yeah.
So as a swing site, but it didn't include costs to do the field.
Okay. And my other question was, do these numbers also provide for bleachers and/or lights?
No, they do not.
So it's just the field or the
And the
track?
track,
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
Other questions? Director Atkins?
Yeah, so I guess that's a really good point to bring up too, that there's still gonna need to be this additional process of making sure we do get more funds. But that aside, once it's there, I think folks will see the need and that it will happen. I guess, I'm super supportive of this and really eager to see this to completion. But my concern is just a caution or a worry just about all the other potential, whether routine replacements or unforeseen, God forbid, emergencies and crises that would come up around facilities that we would need to know this day money for. So that's my only worry here. So, for instance, in your memo you mentioned $1.7 million anticipated to replace the alarm system at Madison, I believe it was, and that's just one system at one school across our entire district. So that's my nervousness and my fear that there's going to be, whether it's around, knowing that we have lots of challenges around overcrowding, that we only can sequence so many bond projects at once. We've obviously got decades to go before we get so. And again, God forbid, the unforeseen disaster or crisis striking. So that's my worry, and I don't know if there's. I guess I would feel better if I knew that staff had sort of mapped out at least the things that you know, some of the things that are concerns, and that it's just getting to that comfort level that we're taking this risk to allocate some of this money for this incredibly worthy and important project, but that we're not gonna be caught short or out on a limb if something both anticipated and or unanticipated comes up.
So we have had that discussion. We will have some additional CET money available, as well as a modest carryover balance. We do have in the budget each year a modest level of capital for the facilities. It's, just somewhere between $3 and $3.5 million. There's a lot to do with that. Tony can tell you that. And I think, we had a staff discussion on Friday about this. And part of it's a trade-off, which is that we've got a number of schools that have this kind of facility and a number of schools that haven't, and we've lifted every rock and kissed every frog to get to the point that we've got so far. And at a certain point, you come to the fairness thing about the kids in those other schools deserve the same thing. And we can't tell you that there won't be some completely unforeseen thing, but we think on the balance, this is a reasonable course to take going forward.
Dr. Blau?
Mine's more of a comment than it is a question. And as I think of Director Atkins, your comment there, I mean, that's part of why I always like to keep our contingency at closer to 5%, because that allows us some of that flexibility in those unforeseen instances. And thankfully, we're in a position to be more likely to be able to do that this year. Director Curler, you pointed out that slide where 46% is by partners and 54% is by PPS. And I think that's an astounding number. It is a great example of using public money to seed private investment. And I can't say enough thanks to Julia Brim Edwards for seeing this through, and Nike. I think of all the spaces that Nike has contributed to in our community to make them usable and presentable, as well as the City of Portland. The City of Portland has been a great partner. They understand. Every time I drive by Franklin and their field all the time, every time in and out of my house, and it's always being used. It's being used in the daytime by community members that are walking around that field. It's used on Sunday mornings by somebody playing kickball. Maybe Director Morton's down there. And it's pouring rain, and they have 2 games going on. It's phenomenal, the amount of investment that it brings to a community and the livability that it creates in our space. Not to mention that, and I'm excited for our next conversation about the athletic discussion about how we're going to reinvest in athletics, because it's such an important experience for our students to engage in. And I know that as we went through Bond, there were 2 sides of the coin. Facilities don't teach kids, and so they don't matter. But I think our community really understands that the facility does demonstrate a commitment to those people using it. And so again, I think this is another example where we say you deserve good facilities, and good facilities are important because they actually help you play better, which help you stay in school. And again, our next conversation, how we're using sports to engage in academics, is very exciting. So I just wanted to say thank you to both our partners. I'm hopeful that the City Council will come through, that they'll see and understand the community livability issue with that. And again, I just want to thank Nike because they've been extraordinary partners in helping us through this.
So the other group I'd like to call out as part of the partners, and Nike has helped us organize this in each of the local communities, but it has been the alumni and boosters and local donors and companies that have created an incredible outpouring of local support for each one of these projects. And again, Nike has loaned executives to us to help us support communities doing some of the local fundraising. So truly there's been a real web. And I see Mike Verbout back here, who was part of the Roosevelt, the group that helped organize some of the funding for Roosevelt, but it was championed over years. Grant, when you heard 12 years, I mean, this was a group of people who really stuck with the vision of what they wanted for their community over 12 years to see it through, and totally energizing at the point that we finally hit completion point. So it's been a huge number of partners in that part of the pie there.
Dr. Morton?
Just real quick, some of the concerns that I had maybe a couple of years ago or a year ago was mostly around how do we maintain these fields as they age. That was addressed again a year or so ago in the development of the long-range facilities plan strategy and maintenance plan strategy, and that really put me to rest. I think at the time we were experiencing a significant sort of immediate issue of almost condemning the Lincoln High School field, right. And we were able to replace that. But it was done in a way that really wouldn't be ideal. Isn't about sort of having a plan in place that allows us to continue to maintain our fields, which is what we do now for not only our fields but also our buildings, which is pretty important. So my challenges were met a while ago with that, and frankly, I mean, a while ago now, we met out at Wilson, and the principal mentioned that over 50% of their student population is involved in sports. Now, not all those sports are field sports, but a big portion of those students at that school use that field. That, to me, is an indication that it is a tool that helps draw kids to school, keep kids in school, makes a big difference, and I think this is a great investment, so thank you. It also is a really excellent example of public-private partnership and community partnership as well, so I don't think we can say that enough.
Great. Director Buell.
Thanks.
This is for Mr. Haskins. I know you're quite a competitor. Have you ever considered the fact of just letting these fields totally mud up, totally using them? Because when the other school comes in, you're caked with mud and freezing. I grew up in Tillamook and played football and stuff in Tillamook, and Tillamook, it rains more than any other community in the Pacific Northwest by far, and I'm telling you, it was a heck of an advantage when you had played in the mud and were freezing all the time. You got used to it, and when they come in one time, it makes all these other ritzy suburban schools come in. You could really maybe, just something to think about and consider maybe.
Take care of those sissies. Okay, so just briefly, did you have something else? Go ahead, Bobby.
So I had a quick question. This is really not just a great fields project, it's also a great fields and track project. So I had a question about 4 tracks. I think I know the answer on one of them, but it looks like we have track and field completion we will have at most of our schools. So I had a question about the track at Marshall. I think we've already redone,
last
right?
year.
And then Wilson, Benson, and Lincoln. Can you give me a status on those?
So you're correct. Marshall was done last year. Wilson was constructed in 06, 07 timeframe.
Okay.
And then Lincoln recently had an issue where the track was being slick. It was slick and felt unsafe. So I don't know whether it's been cleaned yet, but we're cleaning. It's being cleaned right now. So we're hoping to get a few more years out of the Lincoln track before we have to replace that one.
And then
Clean and stripe.
And Buckman.
Benson or Buckman?
So it's a Parks-owned field, but we're working with Parks because it is worn and it could use some repair. So we're working with the city on that, with the Parks Department.
Okay. So likely next up in a couple of years would probably be the Buckman, and the Lincoln Fields would be next. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Great. So I just had 2 questions, and more, it's just refreshing my memory because I know that you've talked about this before, Tony, but the cost of maintaining the fields when they are grass as compared to renewing those fields every 10 years, what's the correlation there?
So it depends on where you are, but here, with the amount of rainfall we get, and it's a lot less taxing on our maintenance workforce to take care of these synthetic fields than a grass field. And the other thing we add into these construction costs as we go forward is equipment. So when we build these fields, we get equipment for that particular field. So that's been one way that we've outfitted our maintenance department with sweepers and tractors to be able to clean and maintain these fields.
That's great. So the other thing that I would just make a comment about is safety. I know David talked about not wanting the girls to tear up the field, but I know that also it's much safer for our students to play on turf than it is to play on a pockmarked field where they're turning their ankles and whatnot. And then as a mother who drove endlessly when my son was playing lacrosse out to North Portland and to the fields out at Delta Park, I was really happy to see Grant Field going, even though my son isn't going to be using it anymore. I know a lot of other parents, it's so much nicer to have your children in your community when they're taking part in these athletic events. Just wonderful. So very supportive of this. And also, I think Julia took off, but I wanted to also thank Julia, oh, there she is, for both her role as a Nike, but also personally, because I know she's put a lot of personal time and energy into this long before Nike was involved. And we really do appreciate your work on this effort for all of our students. And then, of course, to our community and our partners and all the wonderful parents and alumni groups. So thank you. Any comments about the resolution? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, you all.
So next steps would be March 31st.
I think
We
that's-
would be back, and
I
then
think that's it.
David and I are available between now and then if there are any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. Okay.
Oh, in terms of comments on the resolution, I wanted to suggest on the resolution, the Board of Education supports safe places year-round.
Great.
I think we should emphasize the year-round nature of this, so if we could just add that in, it would be great.
Yeah, that'd be good. Anything else? Anyone? Okay. Next on our agenda is a discussion of the 10, oops, that's 10 Great Fields, we did that, is 2014-15 budget and athletics. In January of this year, the board approved the superintendent's recommendation of adding $900,000 toward the district's athletic programs. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I would, and I would like to bring up Trip Goodall, who is our high school director, and Marshall Haskins, who is our district athletic director. And part of what we wanted the opportunity for Marshall to put in front of you specifically, we did do the investment in the budget amendment, and there will be something coming forward in my budget proposal, and I wanted Marshall to have the opportunity to really lay out his vision for rebuilding our athletics program for the district. So, Trip, are you starting?
Superintendent Smith, co-chairs Knowles and Belisle, board members. Thanks for some time tonight to hear from our Director of Athletics, Marshall Haskins, about athletics in Portland Public Schools. And before I start tonight, I just want to state up front that our athletic department is in the process of creating a football schedule for Benson Tech, and that no decisions have been made regarding other sports at Benson. Moving forward, I've asked that our athletic department continues a dialogue with Principals Calvert and Wilson at Jefferson and Benson to set up a series of meetings with our community, with our interested parties at both schools focused on their athletic programs. And I also want to say that I really very much appreciated the respectful way in which the Benson students and community came forward to express their concerns. It really demonstrates quite a bit about what's happening at Benson today and in the past. You know, I've said this before when I've had a chance to introduce people, but I am really fortunate in my career to work with some very outstanding individuals who really believe passionately in their work. They're willing to ask tough questions, and they're willing to challenge the system to be better. As the new director of athletics, Mr. Haskins has brought a vision around what the PIL can be, a vision around what it means to be a coach in our league, and a focus on how best to provide each student athlete a positive athletic experience while competing for their school. A former Jefferson High School standout, Marshall is a PIL Hall of Fame inductee. He was a high school athletic director, a state championship coach, a vice principal, and most importantly for me, a mentor to young adults throughout his career, emphasizing the importance of success in the classroom, on the court, and in the community. I feel really fortunate again to have Marshall in his new role. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Marshall.
Wow, I think I want to.
Okay, let's hear it.
No, I'm just overjoyed to be here. I'll just say a little thing that I went back to school to become a principal, and I applied, I didn't get it, and I was a little disappointed. And I think sometimes you want something you really don't want and you end up getting something better. So I'm fortunate to be here and having something I think is better suited for me in terms of what I really want to do, which is make sure that kids have equitable opportunities. So as I sit here in front of you today, I just want to share with you, I will answer the question in terms of our budget, but I think I really want to share with you the vision we have for athletics, so that as people talk with you, you're just as excited as I am about what I think that athletics could do for the whole city of Portland. I have a friend who lives in Camas, and I went over to visit them, and they said, oh, let me take you to the high school where my son goes. And I'm sitting there salivating at like what athletic program looked like, and I'm thinking, why can't ours be like that? And I went by, I couldn't get into a football game, the rivalry game, because we got there late and we couldn't get in. I'm thinking, wow, that's how it used to be when I played at Jeff and we played against Grant in sports. Why can't it be that way? And I think it can be. So my plan is about revitalizing sports in Portland. It's about galvanizing communities. It's about building better young people through character development. And it's about making sure there's equitable opportunities. So when Director Knowles talked about, one of you guys talked about the number of students we have. We have about 5,500 kids who participate in sports, which is almost exactly half of our athletes. But if at Wilson, who has 1,200 kids, they have 900 kids participating. Roosevelt has about 750, 800 kids, somewhere in there. They don't have 75% of their kids participating. That's a gap to me, and how do we close that gap? So I'm excited about being able to answer some of those questions. I don't go to sleep some nights thinking about them, or thinking about how I can get Tripp to agree with me to do what I want to do. So with that being said, the vision for athletics, my athletic vision statement is we want to build character, community, and academic excellence through equitable athletic programming. In order to do that, we just start thinking in my office and talking with people that are the predecessor to my job in different communities about what are the things that are really important to bring the PIL back to prominence. And so these are the areas that we kind of settled on. One, which addresses the issue of what do we do with the $900,000 that we're so elated to get, which is student safety. And another one is 6A, competitive development, enhancing visibility and value of athletics, parent community engagement, student leadership development, and then what the common thread throughout it will be equitable opportunities for all kids. Basis of my plan, I actually had a unique situation that I started back in 1986 as a basketball coach and integration specialist at Madison High School. I've had the opportunity to work at Jefferson, Wilson, and Franklin High School, so I think I have a pretty good feel for what those communities bear. And then I started thinking about what is that I really want to do, and it's the inequities of facilities, opportunities, supports, and both internal and external. And I started thinking about all the things that I would want to change, that we didn't have turf everywhere, which sounds like we have an excellent chance of good, thanks to all the partners and everyone in the city. We want to have sports opportunities for all kids. So when I think about a grant, they don't have enough kids to really have a wrestling program, and what do we do to build that? Or I think about Benson kids who want to swim, but they can't because there's not enough kids to have a swimming team. Or Jefferson baseball, or one of, if not the best baseball player in the city, certainly one of the top players in the state. They don't have enough to have a varsity baseball team. So he has to make a choice whether he plays baseball at Roosevelt, which is a neighborhood school, or he attends Jefferson to get the excellent focus option that they have. Program expectations is not the same across the system. We don't have multiple levels for appropriate development of kids. We don't have, everyone does have freshman, JV, and varsity. Every student should have an academic choice and an athletic opportunity. If that was one mantra I would leave, that would be it. And then the lack of competition outside of our league. How do we compare or fare with the other leagues across our state? So those are things that we wanted to fix. I'm not going to go into detail about all of the areas because I sent that to you, but there's a couple things I do want to share that I think are really important. The first one is enhancing the visibility and value of our athletics. We have a very unique situation that we're the biggest city in our state, and we have a host of alumni who have not only were great in the PIL, I think we have 400 people in our Hall of Fame, but we have another 200,000 people who play sports in Portland who are still alive and around that have nothing to do with our athletic departments and our schools. And when I hear colleges talk about, I worked at college for a couple years, heard Oregon State, a guy at Oregon State said, you know what, the best thing about our football program is our architectural program grew. And I didn't get the correlation. Because what that meant is when the football program was having great, even though guys didn't play football, they said, wow, I'm so happy about Oregon State, I'm going to give some money to the architecture program because that's what I graduated in. We don't have those same relationships with our alumni. We can build those, and we're going to, that's part of what we want to do. Part of them is letting them know the state that we're in and that we want them to help. We want them to come back to be a part of what we're doing. In terms of internal stakeholder buy-in in education, I met with Cherie today. She came over to our office and we were talking about her department, accounting and payroll, and just how there's just this distance between what's happening in central office, what's happening in the athletic world, and how do we close that? And we had a really good meeting today. I think of talking with Superintendent Smith and just kind of educating her about athletics and its importance, and someone telling me that she was at the Cleveland opening for their concession centers, and how amazed that she was there, and just seeing the level of commitment and support that people will have for athletics. And then as people begin to see that, they begin to understand how important it is for us. We want to do a couple fundraising things as I talk later about just budgeting. Part of fundraising, and I worked with self-enhancement for 14 years and was a vice president of operations and of daily operations for 8 of those years, and fundraising is a major part of what we do. But the fundraising, part of it is for money, but part of it is the visibility and getting people to want to support what you're doing. So we have 3 big fundraisers that we're going to want to do in athletics. One is the PIL 500, where we're actually going to reach out to 500 alumni on an annual basis and ask them to give us $1,000. And we have probably, I'm gonna say, we were rolling pretty good until the strike stuff happened. We were kind of rolling pretty good with commitments from people, but I'd say we probably got about 75 people who've already committed, and we haven't done a groundswell effort. I mean, we haven't sent to the 400 people in the Hall of Fame yet, and they're upset that we haven't asked, but we just have to stop. Second thing we're going to do is we want to have a golf tournament. We have a couple alumni who own Pumpkin Ridge and who want to help us out and set up a situation where we can probably raise $100,000 to $150,000 annually in a golf tournament. And the third thing we want to do is we want to do a walk-run relay. A relay race to all of our high schools. It's a 48-mile loop, and so we would have teams. And we did this thing once called Save Our Schools, and Save Our Sports, and people came out. And Oregon is a big running place, and this could be a tremendous effort to get the community out to support what we're trying to do. We have several people who are interested in doing that. We have a person that we're looking to hire here in a short span as a consultant to help with developing our athletic director, athletic director development, but he's also well connected with all the runners. And so when I told him about the idea, he literally got on the phone, sitting there, called 3 or 4 people, person who owned Hood to Coast, those kind of runs, races, got them on the phone, and they were all ready to go. Can we start right now? Like, no, we're not ready yet. We got some things to do. So I think people are excited to come and help out the city of Portland in athletics, especially those who were athletes themselves. Shifting over to parent and cluster engagement, at the top bubble there, increased opportunities for multiple same-day events. Part of what we have is we don't have communities invested in our athletics, right? Really invested in coming to the schoolhouse. So what we want to do is we want to move some of our games. We want to move some soccer games to Friday night and from the football games. And so instead of being at Delta Park where no one sees you, you get a chance to be in your home stadium where everybody gets to be there under the lights, and it becomes a community event. We're having, as part of our middle school track program, which I'll talk about a little later, but we're actually going to do middle school, high school track meets together. So again, it's a community where people come in and start being a part of the community and investment. We're looking at moving some of our girls' boys basketball games back together. And 6A, they do that because of the travel distance. But it was a very, very, very successful for Grant and Lincoln to do those. So we want to bring that back. In terms of parent engagement, for the first time we have a parent advisory group that I meet with on a quarterly basis. And I'm not techno savvy at all, but I figured out how to do a Google Doc, and so we're putting it in there, and they're going to be back and forth communicating because they're actually helping me develop the strategic plan. So we're really, really excited about that. The other thing, they were instrumental in helping us work towards working with everyone to help make sure we secure the dollars that we got, and we're really thankful for what they're doing. Education and character building. One of the things that athletics provide for us is this excellent captivated audience. And so for me, in order to change a school, if I got at least half the school involved in athletics and we can do character building with them, at least we have a 50% chance of having a really good school. But if we have 75% that have started in our middle school program and have been doing character development for 3 years prior to high school, and then in high school they're doing character development with their coaches, then it changes the whole school, not just athletically, but the whole school. We're currently doing a pilot program at Franklin with boys this year for every boy sport called Coaching Boys into Men. It's a program called Futures out of San Francisco. The AD at Franklin and I went to a training. We implemented it, and it's gone really, really well. As a matter of fact, I tell you, that's why the football team did really well this year, is because they have better relationship with coaches, because they're talking about serious topics and issues and building relationships with kids and becoming more accessible to kids. Problem will, as we do it across the board next year, everybody can't be 6 and 3, so we'll see what happens with that. But we're excited about this. We're going to do that in middle school and high school. We're also going to add in athletic requirements for middle school sports. You'd be amazed at how many kids we lose from the first quarter of eligibility as a freshman at the semester in February, how many kids we lose. The fact is, we lose them in November at the quarter because academics was never part of their athletics. So we're excited about that, and all the middle school principals are excited about having the academics be a part. Student safety, which leads us to the point around the $900,000. We put the whole $900,000 right here in student safety, or 95% of it. When I got the job, a couple things that were in front of us. One, kids were driving kids to games. We had a policy that basically said, you know what, we're not involved in transportation. However you get there, you get there. In my heart, I knew kids were driving kids to games, and that was not okay. Since then, I got letters from parents going, wow, my daughter came home and talked about the great experience she had on the bus. That they rode together as a team, they lost, but on the way back, the coach talked with them, and they felt good about that experience. But we've had the converse. We had teams going to state tournament, and instead of a little yellow bus, we put them on the coach bus, and they're talking about the experience they had riding over the bend and being a team and just getting to be a kid. And we have kids going down to the state tournament and providing transportation. They're just overjoyed with not having to drive, but more importantly, being able to be together and it being a learning experience versus who knows what was happening. We didn't have athletic trainers. And I wish I pulled up all the emails from parents, but I remember one from the Madison basketball coach last week. They were in the state tournament, and they had a trainer, and they hadn't had a trainer there for 3 or 4 years. And he was like, Marshall, thank you so much. You have no idea. One player twisted his ankle in warm-ups, so they literally stopped and taped him up, and he was able to play. Had that trainer not have been there, it would have swollen. Another kid cut his finger, and blood was gushing on the floor. Had there not been a trainer, who knows what would have happened. I mean, so he just went through 3 or 4 things like that happened that It won't show up anywhere, but for the kids and families and coaches, that was a huge investment that we made. It also makes everyone who looks at us and go, wow, they got trainers too. Because all of our surrounding leagues all have trainers. We were the only ones who didn't have it. And then the last thing is we had coaches who weren't getting paid. And so we had this financial fiasco where some people were paying people under the table that can afford it. Other people weren't getting paid at all. And that was just unfair to our kids because some programs, we didn't have programs because we didn't have coaches. And then others, we had this discrepancy in what they were getting paid. So the dollars that you guys allocated to us just cleaned all that up for us, and we're very, very excited about that. And then the last area, which is, they're all equally important, but this one's pretty, I'd probably say, my top list. One is, in order for us to be competitive, people say you want to be 6A competitive. I would tell you all the things that we have on here are things we should have been doing, whether we were 1A, 2A, 10A. They're things that needed to be done. We needed trainers, it didn't matter. We needed transportation. We need to develop our coaches. You know, we need better facilities. We need equitable opportunities for kids. That didn't matter whether we were 1A, 2A, 6A. But in terms of being 6A, what it means, we want to be able to compete with the suburban schools. So how do you do that? First, you make a commitment and an investment, and you've done part of that. The second thing is you have to build feeder school programs. And when we look at the programs we have in the PIL that are really good programs, they all have feeder programs. They have some middle school and even to some extent some elementary schools feed the middle school that then feeds the high school. In our low socioeconomic programs, they don't have feeder school programs. And when you go watch a game, you can see it. And so we have inequities in sports. So like there's an article in the paper about should there be a mercy rule in high school athletics? Because we have a school in Portland Public Schools that averages about 15 points a game on varsity basketball. That shouldn't happen. But it's happening because we don't have middle school sports. And we don't have a way to make sure that, in this case, girls who want to play a sport has a place to go to develop something they love to do. We don't have that in place for them. But in our more affluent pro areas, we have some of those things. So how do we balance that to make sure we have equity across the system? Athletic director and coach professional development. When I met with my parent advisory group, one of the things they said, Marshall, this is a great plan, this is wonderful, we're gonna help you fundraise, this is great, but you know what? If you don't increase the quality of your athletic directors, who then can impact and develop the coaches, then we can't ever impact the outcome for our kids. And I took that to heart. And so we made a commitment that we have a athletic director development plan that we're putting in place starting in April. And then we will then develop our coaching plan that we'll put in the following year that'll start in the 14-15 school year. So we're really excited about that. And then the last two things down here is one is differentiated supports. And oh, I got to say this about the middle school sports. I forgot about how excited I am. So 2 years ago, Roosevelt had 10 kids in their track program. Wilson has 120. Franklin, I counted today, has 147. Grant usually has 175 or 80. Roosevelt had 10. Last year they had 25. This year they think they're going to have 40. So part of our middle school sports program, I'm so excited, is I met with their track coach, and what we're doing is we're having the head coach of whatever sport we're offering is responsible for the system of sports in that cluster. So in this case, the Roosevelt track coach is responsible for the Roosevelt youth track program. So I met with him and one of the coaches from Cesar Chavez, and one of the things that happened was, even though Cesar Chavez has one of the best track programs in the state, it only has 30 kids who are part of it. It's a really select thing. Roosevelt only had 10 kids. How can that happen? If they have 30, so 30, 60, 90 kids should have been at Roosevelt at any point that had been a part of this. And they weren't running. There was no connectiveness. So as we sat there and we were brainstorming, putting together our youth track program, it became clear that we need to build this. So the coach at Cesar Chavez said, well, if we're going to build a youth track program, I can't have only 30 kids. So she says, I think we're going to have 60 at my school. But when you add in the 3 other feeder schools, they all think they're going to have 60. So we have 240 maybe kids running youth track for Roosevelt. Never happened. That's going to get an adult, positive adult coaching them. That's going to be a part of a positive team, have something to do 3 days a week. More importantly than that, they're going to get character building. That's going to change. So instead of there being 10 kids at Roosevelt track 2 years ago, 3 years from now, we're going to have 110, 120 in Roosevelt track. More important than that, kids are going to now begin to see Roosevelt as a more viable option because the track coach at Roosevelt is having the youth come up to their school to practice so he can begin building relationships with them. That is, I want to jump into a jumping jack truck. That is so exciting. That is just wonderful.
I don't know if this is the
This is not the place to do that? Okay, all right. So we're really excited about that, about being able to do that. And but that's part of what we said about differentiating supports and having equitable opportunities for kids. So I'll start there because I could talk all day about this because I'm excited about it, and usually people I talk to get excited about it. So I'll stop there and maybe answer some questions.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. Questions from the board? Excitement from the board?
Okay.
Director Curler.
Yeah, so you were talking about bringing the girls' basketball and the boys' basketball together. Could you explain that to me?
So, I'm not saying I said bring the girls and boys together, but I said
same
that,
night or what?
Yeah, playing the same night. So the girls would play varsity, so it'd be JV boys, JV girls, varsity boys, varsity girls, and then flip-flopping it. So it'd be in one place. So
all
you go
the
to
same
one place, all same site.
Same site.
Yes.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
4 o'clock to 9 o'clock.
Endless.
But everybody in the community will be there.
Right.
So that'll be good.
Still a lot of pizza. Director Regan. Popcorn pizza.
So, I have been on the board for 11 years now, and you've been here about a year. So I wanted to compliment you on your passion and your excitement and your vision. I don't know that our former athletic director ever presented at a board meeting in those 10 years. I don't know that I ever heard about a vision for athletics. When we were doing budget cuts, we were cutting sports. We were even cutting PE one year. I don't remember any advocacy whatsoever from the athletic director. So, and it is such a thrill to have you here and to have you promoting athletics with so much passion. So I really appreciate it. It makes a big difference. So I had one question for you and then one question for the superintendent. The question for you is whether or not you have been doing any outreach yet to the high school booster clubs. Are you meeting with them in any kind of regular way?
Well, not yet, because actually in some places we don't have booster clubs.
Great.
So that's one of the things we're
Are you
trying to
creating?
put in
Okay,
place.
maybe I should be saying, are you helping them create
But on
booster
the other
clubs?
side, yes, because as part of the parent advisory, some of those people come to the meetings and they're waiting for an opportunity.
Okay.
And one of the things we recognize, and I guess I'll just click to this slide, so I'll just get in trouble here, but one of the things that we recognize is that when I took the job, our budget was $2.7 million. And when we added in the 900,000, obviously we can add, that comes to $3.6 million. Most athletic departments in the metropolitan have multiple schools in their district. The budgets are, at the minimum, is 0.91% of the general budget. So my goal at some point is to convince you guys that we need to be 1%, at least 1% of the general budget. I don't want to leave without that. So I know, Tripp, I shouldn't have said that, but I'm gonna say it. So that's one of the things that we really want to push, because we want to have great opportunities for our kids. We have the scoreboard at Madison High School. They don't even make anymore. It was a scoreboard when I coached there, and it was a scoreboard when I played at Jefferson. It's the same scoreboard. The Benson scoreboard has the bottom 3 rows don't even work anymore. That's the state of our athletic department, and we have to change those things. The other thing I want to say is the fundraising piece. We're looking at, even if we got 1%, we're still looking at trying to raise $1.2 million just to have a great athletic program. I don't want a kid at Roosevelt not being able to play because their parents don't have money. But I also don't want a kid at Lincoln to go to a game against Jesuit and go, wow, look what they have and look what we have. That shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be that we don't have jumbo javelins that stick in turf because we can't afford to have it, so we don't have javelin. Or we can't have pole vaulting because we can't have pole vaulting pits. That shouldn't be the case anymore for us. So that's part of that advocacy. So yes, I do intend to go to booster clubs. I think there's a huge place for them. Part of our conversation today with Cherie Lewis was, well, how do booster clubs work? Because I have some booster clubs who generate $50,000, $60,000 for their athletic program. And I have some schools who get nothing. So in my original plan, it was actually some dollars allocated to develop booster programs at all of our schools and help them figure out how to fundraise in their community. And it doesn't matter, all of our communities in Portland have the capacity to help out their school. It's just a matter of helping them. Should I expect the same amount from all the communities? No. But I know, like the Benson alumni, I was talking with their athletic director, they don't have this gigantic booster club. There's a lot of prominent people that went to Benson that can step in and help. How do we get them to want to step in and see themselves as boosters, as athletic boosters? I think we can do that.
Great, thank you. And then I had, it may be more of a comment than a question for you. So first of all, I'm completely thrilled that we're focusing on a middle school sports program. And I guess what I see a lot of times from kids that I talk to is they have a lot of, they kind of wax poetic about their elementary school experience and they love their high school experience. And it's those middle years that are just a little funky. And you can just tell kids just don't have as much excitement about that. So I think that bringing back, bringing some sort of a athletic presence to our after-school, kind of to our middle school programs is great. But I guess the area that I'm also wondering about is areas like band, where it just changes the high school experience when you have a band and they're at all of our sports games and the rest. But it's really hard to have a band program if kids haven't had that experience leading up to it. So it's a similar kind of thing. So I guess my question or suggestion is, I know that with the city arts tax, we now have an opportunity, more arts and music and the rest, teachers at the K-5 area. But to the extent that we can support our middle school kids more, and I know the Arts TOSA, the teacher on special assignment that you have on board, is supposed to kind of give us a kind of a pathway from that K-5 up through high schools. But at some point, it might be worthwhile elevating that position to, a Portland Public School arts director, like we have an athletic director, and really focusing in on what we can do at the middle school level to keep kids engaged, because we know that a lot of times if kids, it's that 8th, 9th grade transition, if they have the music or the band or the drama or the athletics or whatever it is that just pulls them right up into high school, it's such a better experience for them. So anyway, I just wanted to plant the seed.
Seed planted. And I will say, so Marshall, when he has been talking about the building of the feeder patterns into high school, he had me out in other districts where I was sending photos back of the signage up at other schools, recruiting at the middle grades and elementary grades for the high school teams and building the feeder patterns. So he's had an immediate impact on, but I have to just say, I'm really excited about the vision that Marshall's brought to athletics. And as I said, you will see something in my budget proposal that is continuing to build on his capacity to make that be the vision become real. And the investment we made this year was a big deal relative to the fact that what's been happening is just continuous cutting and erosion, and this has been a really significant opportunity to start to rebuild, and there's great excitement around the community about the fact that we're rebuilding. So.
Other board comments?
Go ahead. I'll wait.
Director Martin? No. No, Steve? Okay. Director Buell?
I think it was about 1975 when I first came to a board meeting and talked about engaging kids in middle school in things, major portion of which is athletics. And so I have 2 hours worth of questions easily. I don't think my colleagues want that. I want it to be okay if I came in and scheduled some time and chatted with you specifically about these things, because I've got a whole lot of things. And so I guess maybe I'll just do that. I do have, there are basically 3 things that bring kids out for athletics or stop them really. And one is the quality of the coaches. And a lot of that quality is built around their dynamics and their relationships with the kids. I mean, I'll give you a whole lot of that. Another is the money. We're charging kids. How much are we charging now to play if you're playing basketball, high school basketball?
High school is $200, is $235 for free and reduced.
For what?
For free and reduced lunch is $35, and $200 for non-free and reduced lunch.
Yeah, it's too much. We need to do something about that. I don't know what we do about it, but we did. I know, that's way too much. And the third
You can move
is
us to
what?
1.5 million, 1.5%, it could be free.
I got it, if you got 5,500 at 200 apiece, I got it down here at 1.1 million.
Huh?
5,500 kids at 200 apiece, it's 1.1 million. That's what I wrote that down. I
Right,
have it
that's
written.
That's if they all pay.
I'd vote for that.
Right.
I'd vote for that in a second.
Okay.
Send you that money.
All right.
And the third thing is whether they played in middle school. Now, I taught for 10 years in Evergreen School District. Have you been up ever? Are you familiar with their middle school athletic programs? Are unbelievable.
Yes.
They had 500 kids out of the 1,000 in our school involved in the music program. We had teams all over the place that got on buses, played games, uniforms, jackets, blue, and it had a tremendously positive effect on the middle schools. And then third comment I had, I think, for public discussion, I really will, hopefully if it's okay, come in and chat with you at some length about this stuff. And the other comment is, we need to figure out how to work K-8 middle school. Because K-8 kids need these things as much as anybody else, and I don't know if we're thinking that through,
I can
or
answer that.
we have some stuff. I'll come in and I probably have some ideas.
So.
Why don't you go ahead and answer the question
So,
about K-8,
so
Marshall?
we have this unique situation in Portland where we have 43 schools that have 6th, 7th, 8th graders in them. That's a lot. So what we did, rather than have a girls' basketball team in every school, what we did is go grant youth basketball. And then we'll have 2-3 teams from that cluster at that grade level. So when I look at a school, so there'd be 24 girls who would be a part of the 6th grade basketball program that would come and want to be a part of that. 24 7th graders and 24 8th graders. If there's more student interest, we would add teams, but it would all be under the guise of Grant Youth Basketball, not necessarily Cesar Chavez or Beverly Cleary. Then that's the only way you can do it, because how this structured, there's no way to do that.
By neighborhood and cluster.
So it'd be by neighborhood and cluster.
But it
Yeah.
gets coordinated through both from your.
It'll all be coordinated from our office,
And
yes.
then down
In
to the
partnership
high
with youth
school.
programs
Right.
as well in those neighborhoods.
And then there's still the Parks and Rec program.
Yeah, so I could address that too. So the park, I'll use track as an example. So track has a walk, run, something. They do it at Grant every Saturday. And you come up and you pay your $2. You're not coach, you're not anything. You just show up and you pay your $2. You get a T-shirt one time and you run your race and you're done. Well, we actually are trying to prepare our kids to be high school track athletes. So we're having practice 2 days a week, and we're having at least one meet a week, and we're providing transportation. But more importantly, we have paid coaches who actually know something about track. So kids are actually being able to develop their talent. And we have days where kids are going to come up and they're going to get exposed. The first day is going to be an exposure. They're going to go through all the track events to find something that they like or have an aptitude for. And then they're going to get coached in that. So we're totally different than Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec needs to exist. We want them to exist. We want to coexist. In the best of all worlds, what we would hope is Park and Rec has level A, level B, level C, and then it has what they call high school prep, which means in girls basketball, for example, in A, B, and C, they do running time, which means the clock never stops, 32 minutes, and the scores are 12-8 at the end of the game. Well, in the high school competitive league, and everybody gets to play, it's qualified, and everybody gets to play. Every 4 minutes you sub. In the high school league, it's like a regular high school game, where you have better officials, you have stop time, you have kids that have played, kids that are practicing 2-3 days a week, and that's where we're concentrating our effort on, is on the high school prep piece. The recreational piece is in place through the Park Bureau, and we don't want to replace that.
Questions, Director Atkins?
I'm really excited about this and want to appreciate and echo everything that Director Regan said just in terms of this is the first time. And so I just want to call out, Carol's leadership overall in launching this, hiring you, you and your senior team, and then Marshall, Mr. Haskins, your leadership. This is incredibly exciting. So I'm just thrilled, and the middle school 6th to 8th grade piece is huge, as well as really bringing our, you said it all so well, Bobby, but I just wanted to echo my excitement and enthusiasm. And as far as that marathon all around between high schools, I could maybe
I think the board should be 2 teams right here, 5 and 5. We have.
I'll drive.
Support vehicle.
Anyway, it's
Use my
thrilling
razor.
and exciting.
Charge the mileage.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
And Director Beal, I think most middle school fields are grass. So most of the middle school fields are grass and muddy. So we'll be okay.
Yeah. Director, hey,
Thank
wait a
you
minute.
both.
Gentlemen.
You are not finished yet, you guys. Thank you. Director Blau.
Thank you. And I think if I did the math correctly, you said it was about 48 miles, and you just broke the board into 2 teams. That means each of us has to run
That means
12 miles.
You can walk or run.
Okay, walk.
So somebody has to do it twice.
Is it a week-long relay? I'm just kidding. I look forward to it. I'd love to join a team. I just want to echo what my colleagues said, how exciting it is to, one, be focusing again on athletics, because it's such an important engagement tool, as Director Buell pointed out, how important it is for students to develop just as them whole selves. And I really appreciate, I know you didn't spend a lot of time on it, but combining the academics with the expectation of sports, that you do both. This isn't an either or piece. I really appreciate that, so thank you for taking the time to develop that. And I guess I'm really confident that this will engage students in a way that we haven't been able to do. So again, I'm just going to keep pointing out that we're in a unique position this year from in years past, where we are able to make these, they're really small investments, as you pointed out. If we could do 1% or 1.5%, it would make such a significant difference. So yes, thank you, Superintendent, for realizing how important this is to our students, putting the people in place to make it so that it's a possible in reality. And again, I just hope that we can continue to advocate that our resources don't go back to the old pattern of being reduced.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, our last big agenda item is also a budget item for early learning. Superintendent Smith, would you like to go ahead and introduce this?
I would, and I'll invite Dr. Harriet Adair to come on up to do our early learner presentation, and Sue Ann Higgins, our Chief Academic Officer. As we tee up the presentation, and again, this is something that you're going to see something come forward in my budget proposal, but I want you to get a sense of the vision from Harriet. And much of this is not going to be new to you, but it will be putting together the pieces and teeing up what you're likely to see in this next budget.
Well, good evening. I've been sitting in the back, and I've noticed how many times I heard excited about this, and I hope that maintains itself through this presentation. I want you to get really, really, really excited about this. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the early learners. educational centers that we're opening, and the early learning programs in Portland Public Schools. And it's going to be a fairly brief presentation, talk a little bit about the why, which is going to be covered by this little video you're going to see because it captures it quicker, better than I could. And then we're going to talk about the what of Portland Public Schools. Okay? So go ahead. Video put together by the government that's much slicker than anything I could have ever come up with and cost me no dollars. I'm not sure about that tobacco tax innuendo there. Okay, so that's basically the why, and I'm going to just basically just have you go through how we're going. There we go. These are basically, I'm going to briefly tell you, all these things. These are all the programs that we've had in Portland Public Schools since the 60s. And we're right along with where we are now is basically right along with where the president's agenda is, where the local agenda is, where our state agenda is, and our city agenda is, which is basically making sure that more students enter kindergarten ready to learn, that they exit reading, ready to read, that they then meet the third grade benchmark, one of those standards being, of course, that they enter fourth grade reading to learn. So we basically have in Portland Public Schools, our agenda deals with the continuity of things. It deals with the fundamental commitment that we've always had. It is a transformative perspective because it basically is something that we're looking at, something that goes not only from kindergarten to first grade, but also across all the continuum of grades, and it's cost-effective return on our dollar. We made these decisions about what we would do because we knew that these supports were necessary, but we also know that we couldn't fund all of the things that we wanted to have done in our schools because we just don't have all the dollars. We're coming to a place now where, having been in the system for a while, I know that since the 90s we've been in decline, and it's now time for us to start looking at going back up again. So we're trying to figure out how can you stretch those dollars further. We know that transitions are critical and that the transitions now are very different than the transitions used to be in the 80s when we first started some of our other pre-K programs. We also know that program monitoring and standards that were aligned were lacking because we started these programs in isolation and in small numbers. And we know that some of our program decisions relative to movements to K-8s and the addition of dual language programs has caused some space constraints that were not necessarily anticipated. So looking at all of those, we knew we needed to do some different things. So we decided to figure out how could we take what we were doing all along and make it work better for more students and move in the direction that all of the research is telling us we need to go. So here's what we're thinking about. I want to say before we go that we have a group of folk that are working with me. One of those members is here, one is in the back. One that's with me is Deborah Berry, who's the director of the Head Start program for Portland Public Schools. And in the back, she said she had to sneak out, is Nancy Houth, who's our fee-for-service kindergarten person. But we have what we call as a group of early learners, and we have this as a working group. This is not just a group of people that come together just to sit around and talk and share information. On that group are teachers from Head Start and pre-K, special education, fee-for-service kindergarten, options, pathways to, multiple pathways to schools, Title I, Head Start, Early Head Start, and the Equity Office and community partners. And we come together to talk about what we think we need to do, and that's where most of our ideas came from. First were generated from, and then we move them forward. Okay? Oop. So here's where we're moving, and this is what's in the budget. We have, and I know you have this in your packet, so I'm just going to kind of go through it, and then I'm assuming you're going to ask some questions. We're basically moving toward regional education learning centers, we're calling them, and that we're planning on trying to open up one in September at Clarendon, and this would have, a center would serve about 120 students in 2014 and 15, and pick up an additional 120 in 15-16. And this is part of the total support program that we're putting into the Roosevelt cluster. I'll talk a little bit more about that and its braided funds. We are going to have one Spanish-speaking classroom and one in Indian education program classroom. We used to have a Title VII Indian Ed program, Montessori program here that we're going to reinstate at the Clarendon site. In addition to our MECP programs, those students would be part of the integrated into the classrooms, the other 4 classrooms in the program. We're also involved in ongoing conversations with Foster with NAEA about opening the Foster site, and of course the FOBI and Concordia program. We're also looking at making sure that we're expanding our culturally specific and dual language programs, not only at the Clarendon site but other places. We're looking at realigning some of the programs, and of course having the Kindergarten Connect program span across January through the summer. Then we have what we call the Early Learner Thrive by 5 agenda, which is the EKT program. We're looking at talking to see about a milestone that could be added to our milestone chart that basically shows ready to learn as one of the first milestones.
Hey, Harriet, when we do the EKT, just for our viewing audience, will you say what the EKT?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Early Kindergarten Transition Program that we have had typically in 4 schools, but now we're putting it in all of our focus and priority schools this upcoming year, this year now. We know that in 2015-16, we're going to be moving to full day K, so we're actually going to start planning for that transition. This is the state move to full day K. We already have full day K here in our system, but there are some definite things that we need to put in place because we're anticipating that some folks who had not been placing their children in kindergarten might actually take advantage of that. I already talked about the expansion of the Kindergarten Connect activities and looking for additional ways to fund all of the above other than just the general fund. But we're looking for grants and other ways to see how we could fund these programs. So why are we moving to regional centers? Well, basically it says that one of the things we know is that if you have the integrated services that are going to be involved in these programs, especially in terms of special education and ELL, because in the early learner centers, it's more about language development. Everybody's learning language at that point in time. It's not necessarily about English as a second language. It's actually about just acquiring the language skills. So that we know that when these programs are co-located, you end up with a number of students that when they exit that needs what we call SPEL services. They need special education and ELL services. We also know that it's the family engagement opportunities. When you start with those early and you transition throughout the grades, then you end up having more sustainable impact at the other end when they get to the middle grades that you were just talking about and into high school as well. We have space and funding constraints that mean that we are unable to provide as much service to students as we'd like to provide to students. So co-locating different programs in one place allows us to stretch those dollars and those services across versus trying to get from one building to another building to another building to another building. We know that we need to partner well because our partnerships end up having us have more things available, and it's cost effective because we have aligned standards and inclusion of critical program components. So I talked a little bit about the Roosevelt cluster. We're starting there at Clarendon. This is a conscious thought, not only because the Clarendon building is available to us and makes it possible, but what we also have going on in that cluster is they are invested in systems planning across the cluster schools. This is all of the schools in the cluster. They also have AVID in that cluster. They also have Gear Up in that cluster. So you have the ability to start working with a certain set of parents and following them all the way up through the 12th grade continuum of skills. So it's just consciously impacting support services across the cluster with an intention that you would end up with better attendance, because Roosevelt has historically not had the best attendance of the schools in the system, and it also means that you have relationships that you form with the community and with the parents in that community. Okay. So, just to emphasize this, that we're talking about regional centers, but we're not talking about eliminating the pre-K programs that are single programs in a building, even though we'd like to see a way to enhance those programs, because those students could also use these supports. So we're looking at both, and we want you to think in terms of, I know some of you have visited, I just saw Director Adkins out at one of the centers that is the one that people talk a lot about, the Gladstone Family Service Center. That was where we just are. We want to have those kinds of programs available, but we also know that we want to have one-stop places like the Earl Boyle Center that other people are talking about, which is in the Gladstone District, where they have a single unit of pre-K available, and it's just a neighborhood school-based program. If you live in the Earl Boyle's feeder pattern, you have that program, you have access to that program. If you don't live in that feeder pattern, you don't have access to that program. So we're talking about Clarendon, which is in deep north, Fabian, which is a little further in, closer to the Cully neighborhood, and then the Foster Naya program are the centers that we're talking about bringing online within the next 2 to 3 years. And these are targeted toward what we call our high impact, high need areas and populations. This is also where there is an expansion of population along those corridors. So, in terms of funding, this year we funded EKT at the priority and focus schools. We have someone who's helping us to coordinate this. We piloted the kindergarten readiness assessment, that's the KRA, and we started some of the collaborative work at the Foster site. We also applied for state Oregon Community Foundation funds, the city and other early learner resources to help pay for things for this year and for next year. We did get the OCF money, as a matter of fact. And we have phase 1 next year of the Clarendon Regional Center. We're looking at flexible funding, because we have to look at flexible funding because the pre-K programs that we currently have in this district are funded through Title I, so you cannot supplant Title I programs with general fund dollars, so you have to figure out how do you expand and know that all these budgets are in tight limitations, so that's why we're braiding the funds. We also are looking to expand the transition activities up through grade 3, so we have that 4th grade handoff. And we're also looking for this to be the lead, someone to have actually the responsibility to be a lead for this program. You see me sitting here, but that's not my sole responsibility. We often call on Nancy for things. We often call on the Head Start ladies for things. We need to have somebody clearly identified that as we move this work into something that's more coordinated and continuous, that they know who the contact person is so that we can have that person lead this work. Okay. We have looking at as I said before, the mixed funding and Head Start expansion sites. And then finally, in 2015 and beyond, that we would have full day K district-wide, a mix of school-based and center programs. Cully is a priority, which we haven't identified at this point in time how we could help that or how we could serve that. But as you know, there's kind of this vast area between about 33rd all the way up to 82nd and then all the way out, almost to Stark, where there's a lack of services available, that we know we need to have something there to help that with that population, and that the KRA would be fully implemented this year. The KRA was a state mandated process, and this year they just looked at participation rates, and I'm assuming that they're going to be looking at data and other sorts of things in the future. That's the kindergarten readiness assessment. Yes. Thank you for making me get off my initials. And then we would have expanded culturally specific programming and support for families. Right now we have several Spanish speaking classrooms. We're looking at extending those classrooms into other languages and also expanding our supports to other cultural groups as well. So, always nice to look at little people, just to kind of remind you that college and career readiness begins in pre-kindergarten. Just thought I'd put that plug in. And I do have for each one of you what we gave for our kindergarten teachers. This is something we stole. We're going to add that to this, but as you notice, this says college begins in kindergarten, we're going to add and career readiness, and this is what we gave all the kindergarten teachers this time. And this is a poster that the Ed Trust originally put out and no longer distributes, so they allowed us to capture this and distribute it with their information. So there we are. That's my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments from the board? No one?
Oh, wow. I'm liking that.
Director Reagan, go ahead.
So exciting, amazing. So thank you for all this.
That's right.
Yeah,
Amazing.
thank you
right.
for all this
Really
good work. So, a couple of softball questions first.
Okay.
When you're talking about early learners, what ages are you talking about?
Well, actually, we have on ours P through 3, which is third grade is the 3. But the P could be, because we're partnering with Early Head Start, could actually be prenatal. But we're not going to provide that service. I want you to remember that. That would not be something we would provide. We are currently doing that right now because we have a contract with Albina Head Start Early Learners Program, and at Roosevelt, the Teen Parenting Program is what they are supporting those parents.
But when you're talking about the program at Clarendon?
They will have a classroom of Early Head Start at Clarendon that will be from the Albina Head Start. They are applying to money from, they are 18 months. Thank you. I did see Eileen joined us, by the way, the other director of Head Start. So it's 18 months, I'm sorry.
So starting at 18 months.
18 months, right.
But again, that would be through the partnership, not
Yes.
us directly.
No.
And I guess that's, so my two big questions are around transportation, especially if you're using a hub approach. What would we be looking at in terms of transportation versus, at their local elementary school? Would be one of the questions. And then the other question is just around funding and who's paying for all of this. So
Okay.
can you walk me through those two? I have some other questions, but hopefully my colleagues will hit some of them.
Okay, right now we provide no transportation to any of the Head Start sites, and that would be the same as it is for the regional centers. We're not providing transportation.
Okay.
Okay.
And then funding.
Funding, I saw your question, but unfortunately I saw it on my way as I was heading to another meeting, so I didn't answer. But basically, the funds are braided, and so I'm going to try and give you as much clarity as you asked for. Right now, they would be funded by Title I, Title I, which is how we fund our pre-Ks. We have Head Start Title I dollars as well from the federal government. We have Oregon pre-K dollars that'll be flowing in. We have Portland Children's Levy dollars that are coming in. We have Title VII, which is how the Indian Education Montessori program was funded. We have special education dollars from what used to be Multnomah County, but now it's the David Douglas district. Got that grant, got those dollars. We have the OCF grant. We have Early Head Start dollars, and then we have general fund dollars. The grant dollars before I hit the general fund dollars are what typically will pay for the instructional pieces, because that's the formula we have now. We cannot use general fund dollars to pay for teachers and the educational assistants in the program. The general fund dollars then pick up the cost of things like the materials for the classroom, the activities for the classroom, and those sorts of expenses, the external to the classroom expenses.
And how about facilities upgrades?
The facilities upgrades, I was hoping my gentleman is right here to talk to you about this.
Tony Magliano, Deputy Chief Operating Officer. There's a couple of pieces to the facilities upgrades. Clarendon's been a building that's been sitting idle for a while. It's become an eyesore in the community. And it's one of our assets that I've recognized we need to take care of. So split between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, we were already planning on fixing the roof and repairing the basic interior of the building. I mean, you can imagine when a roof leaks as bad as that one's been leaking, what happens inside that building. So we're taking care of those things. Now,
And when you say we, is that through
so
the bond?
district,
Is
no,
that the
that's
district
through,
maintenance?
That's through facilities and maintenance. So
So
You know,
just
it's,
regular-
it's a portion of the $3 million
Okay.
that facilities gets.
'Cause that was at the back of my mind with my earlier concern
Right.
about the construction.
So, but now when the building's in that condition, we could either lease it out or we could provide it to support one of our internal programs. When you do that, that could trigger a thing called tenant improvements, meaning the building isn't designed to meet whoever's moving in there. When you lease it out, you can pass that burden on to the tenant. In this case, it would be our own internal program, our Head Start program. So that Clarendon, they would need some internal demolitions, some new walls to create space adequate for learning, ADA improvements in the building. There's a lot of other floors and walls that need to be patched and fixed. The kitchen is completely dysfunctional and would need to be upgraded. So there's a lot of work that would have to go in. So when you look at the early learning budget and the facilities things in there, that's talking about the tenant improvements necessary to make it fit their needs.
And that will all happen before August?
That's what we're planning on. So we're already rolling on the things prior to the tenant improvement. So we've already begun the work to get the roof repair. We haven't started it, but we began the process. So we hope to get a jump start on those things. And the roof's that is the biggest thing and would take all
That
summer.
was part of this year's budget.
Right.
Like, we had already put that in this year's budget, that we needed to do that repair on the roof regardless of how the building
Right.
was used, so, yeah.
And then there's also some ongoing O&M. When you open up a building and make it operational, you need to have custodians, the level of maintenance you need to maintain, the utilities go up. So you'll see that included as ongoing in the early learning budget.
So on my funding question, I'm still curious to understand what this whole program is going to cost in terms of our general fund allocation, because generally our general fund is kindergarten through 12. So obviously we're diverting some funds in the hope that kids will be more prepared to be successful when they hit kindergarten, but I'm just trying to understand what amount of funding we're talking about here.
And that's part of what you're hearing Harriet describe, a very complex, when she's talking about braided funding. And actually, of the classrooms that we were talking about being at Clarendon next year, 3 of them, I think, are already in neighborhood schools that would be moving to Clarendon and relieving some space issues that we currently have, and then 3 are new, is that correct?
Right.
So, or would be newly, kids that we don't already serve in the classrooms. But it's combining a bunch of them, and even between what you're hearing described here, there are a set of costs that I would propose as being one-time costs. That would be ones that I would say are things that would fit in the one-time cost category, and then others that are ongoing costs. And that's part of what you'll see coming forward in the budget proposal, in terms of what would be asking for out of general fund.
But just out of just a general order of magnitude, what are we talking about?
So I'm still working through which pieces of it I'm going to actually put forward to you. You'll hear it next Monday. And the reason I'm saying that is just because there's a bunch of trade-offs right now, and this one's a very full package that I'm looking at this moment, some of which could be like phased in over 2 years, some of which I could recommend to you I would do all at once, and where we're looking at what's the interaction of all these different funding streams with each other. So like when you're using Title I, it may preclude. There are things that by using one funding stream, then you can't use another one partnered with it. So we're in that kind of a conversation right now, but next Monday I'll bring forward an actual proposal to you. So sorry I can't be more specific at this point, but
that's fine.
yeah.
So then this one would be all PPS programs, but co-locating different pieces of PPS, but also the early Head Start as well. But unlike some of the other models and maybe other models that we would do in the future, it's not the broader co-location of health and, mental health. It's not that.
Actually, we are looking at adding some of the mental and
Services.
physical health
Okay.
pieces in as well. And we are looking at trying to see if we can add some of the OCF grant. Actually, is a partnership with the Neighborhood House, which is on the other side of the river, that's going to provide the Sun School programming, and there are people that are contacting us to see about before and after care. So it is a partnership of other kinds of programs. So that's why I say if we partner well, we can have some very a full-bodied program that isn't coming out of our dollars, but in essence supports our students and our families well.
Yeah, and we were just going into some of that at Gladstone, did a hearing from the superintendent about how they put that together and how they did sort of a almost customized agreement depending on the partnership and what the partner brought, whether it was money or in kind or various. So they've worked it out, and the wonderful, generous, and we were giving you their operating agreement so that we can learn from. They learned from us originally at Rosa Parks. Now we can go back and learn some more from them. So that was really exciting to hear. Can I go off on a side a little bit on the funding, just around the federal piece, which of course is out of our control, but just to highlight, President Obama's vision in his budget, our Congress hasn't come nowhere near funding that. So just to point that out, we have this vision and this potential for what we could be doing as a nation for our children, and Congress has failed to fund that. So just to put that out there. And however, though, I think there was the sequestration cuts that we had that impacted our Head Start slots did get restored somewhat in the federal budget. So if you could just give us
a little bit about that. We don't have any clarity around how much that is or isn't, but we were with the Region 10 folks last week. And they mentioned that, and of course we perked up, but nobody ever gives you a...
Okay, so we don't know in terms of number of kids that we can serve.
Right.
Okay, but that's coming. So it's a little glimmer, at least it's not as bad as it had been before in terms of the disinvestment in children. But once again, as we continue to talk about advocating, and I know that a lot of our Oregon delegation, or most, if not all, is very supportive of this, but there's other members of Congress are not, unfortunately.
And we totally understand that there's competing agendas. Everybody really, there isn't an age group that couldn't benefit. We totally recognize that. Right.
Director Morton?
Thanks. I just have a couple of quick comments. One is this is an area that I have particular urgency around, and we have, I think, all shared that urgency at one point or another. One of the things, as you were speaking, I looked up the Coalition of Communities of Color report in 2010, specifically around early learning. And it's a couple of things that really striking to me, and I think we have to be aware of. About little over half of all white children participate in some sort of preschool before entering kindergarten. But when you enter into, you look at the disaggregated numbers based on race, particularly those underserved populations, it goes down significantly. About 16% in the Latino community participate in preschool prior to kindergarten, 27% in the Native American community, 32% in the African American community. So there's significant barriers that exist prior to kids entering kindergarten. And I think that's important to note because we're looking at just a small piece of the overall early education pie here. You think about K-8s and K-12s being sort of anemic. Head Start, early Head Start, preschool programs are historically and consistently anemic in terms of resources. So I think when we create opportunities to invest some general fund dollars to support preschool education or pre-education, I think it's well worth the money. The other thing too, and this is my last point, is this is an incredible opportunity to leverage resources. We talked earlier about the 40, leveraging 52% to 48 or 54 to 46% participation in the Great Fields Project. This is an opportunity where there's millions and millions of dollars coming in from multiple sources, including private sources like foundations. You mentioned Oregon Community Foundation. The Portland Children's Levy is a tax revenue as well, but it's also a competitive grant process too, and many others. In fact, the Gates Foundation has announced that early education is a priority that they want to fund at this point too.
We were talking about that this afternoon. We actually went over to see our grant writer today to say, okay, what do we need to do internally to see if we can bring people on board to say, can we get this dollars? We're on it.
Yeah. So, but it is a great opportunity for us to leverage a small investment on our end that can yield quite a bit of investment from a number of different sources. So I'm really in support of it, and I know the work that you all do is good work helping to prepare our students for that next level kindergarten. So, thank you.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for the presentation and focus again on the fact that this is an investment that we're making. You know, it's not something that just stops at the program. It goes on through high school, you know, through college and through, you know, the students' careers. So it's something that I'm really excited about. I'm really looking forward to the recommendation we get from the superintendent. So thank you.
Could I just one more comment too?
Good.
Yeah, I'm just so excited by this. Thank you so much for this. And I just wanted to put in a plug or a request that as we go, I'm really excited about the both and approach. And I think there's going to be, so starting with the regional centers and the partnerships and wraparounds is going to be awesome. But I also want to make sure that we're really clear around the school-based plan and that we don't lose sight of just being really clear and planful about how we're going to avoid that bumping and shuffling around. And so as we go forward, I'd love to see more information about what's that strategy and plan for mapping that out, given that we have, you know, the overcrowding schools and the boundary changes and the bond and on, to make sure that truly our earlier learning is integrated with the rest of the system and the planning that we do. So that's a piece that I'm looking for, as well as being super excited about seeing Clarendon reopen for this awesome use and the other partnerships coming down the line. So thanks so much.
I wanted
Bobby?
to tack on to the both and comment too, because one of the things that I look at, if you look long term, our goal was to have a 30-year bond program. And clearly we're starting the first couple of bonds to try to rebuild our high schools. But as we go, and even in the first bond we have the Fabian Concordia partnership, my understanding with Fabian and that rebuild is that will include an early learner center. And my guess is that the fact that we're doing this initial program now and the fact that we probably won't be rebuilding our elementary schools for another, 5 or 10 years, this will give us a really good opportunity to see how the Fabian model is working, see how the hubs are working, and see whether we want to do more of the early learner centers built right into our next, either K-8s or K-5 schools as we go. So I think it does give us quite an opportunity to be planning ahead and figuring out the both and piece of this. So it's exciting.
Director Buell?
Let's see if I can understand this, because we have about 4,000 kids. If we had everybody in kindergarten, we would have 4,000 kindergartners, right? Because you'd say 48,000 divided by 12. Well, we wouldn't have quite that many because you're dividing the K by 12 too, right? So it'd be a little less. So what we're looking, and we have Title I programs and Head Start and a lot of pre-K programs that we give money to through some ways and different ways. Okay. Now the 3 hubs that we're talking about, Clarendon, Fabian, Foster, all 3 of those are pre-K hubs.
Yes.
Which are what came out of the OEIB, OD recommendations.
I want to say yes, but I have to tell you that we were already thinking about doing those sorts of things. So yes, we're lined up with them, but we were already working on them. Actually, Director Buell, part of the pre-K thing came out of your last watch on the board. In the creation of the early childhood education centers is where we actually first started the pre-K efforts in Portland Public Schools. So that's why I'm kind of hesitating.
Desegregation plan.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But are these 3 of the hubs that, if I go down to the OEIB and I say, hey, we doing hubs, where are we doing them?
Oh, no,
Would
no,
they say-
their hubs are funding sources.
No, I'm talking about the hubs that they're talking about.
No. These are our
These are
own.
totally our own?
These are our own.
So did we get money from them for them? Because my understanding when I was at the OAB, that one of the hubs that we were looking at from the state was the Foster side. I mean, they talk about that type of stuff all the time down there. These are not part of their $70 million grant.
We are applying to them for grant dollars, but none of that has been awarded to us at this time. So some of those dollars might come to us. It's the only reason I can't tell you definitely yes is because, you know, when you apply for something, you don't know whether you've got it
Right.
yet. That's
But
all I
they
can
talk
say.
all the time about the hubs and putting these hubs around the state.
The
and
hubs at the
da-da-da,
state- the
and
hubs
one
at-
and having one in Portland. They talk about that all the time, and they're taking credit for these hubs. So
What-
these hubs aren't theirs after
Okay.
all, or are they going to do other hubs, or?
Well, let me just tell you,
There's a hub gap here.
So here, yeah, there's a hubba. So here what we have going on is that this is why we're calling ours regional educational learning centers, early learner centers. The hubs that the state is talking about are funding sources. They're going to be the ones that have the money to distribute out to the various programs. And ELM is the hub that I'm certain that you must be referencing that's going to be in Multnomah County. And it's the early learner Multnomah. And so that is not a Portland Public School hub, but definitely Portland Public School will benefit, hopefully, from dollars that flow through ELM. That, I think, is what you're referencing. So when I'm talking about what we're doing, that's why I'm calling them, we call ours something different than hubs. They're regional early learner centers.
And not that this will create any clarity at all, but that's being co-convened by United Way
Right.
and Multnomah County.
County, right.
And PBS is a partner.
So if we have 4,000 kids, let's just say 4,000 for people who aren't as quick at math, say, as some of you are. For us people who aren't that sharp in math. If we have 4,000 kids, how many kids do we have out of 4,000, say, would there be in all of these preschool programs without these 3 regional learning centers?
Without the 3 regional learning centers, and if we were to just maintain, basically, it sounds like what you're saying, if we just maintained
What we had
our
without
current
these.
level of pre-K supports, we currently have 5 classes of pre-K, which run around 20 kids in a classroom and 100 that are in the various sites. We also have 804 Head Start students, so we're basically looking at, what, about 1,000 kids.
And this adds how many?
The 4 hubs, if the 3 hubs, if they got up and running, at Clarendon, we're looking at 6 classrooms. That's about 240. Half of that would be new services. That's about 120 at Clarendon. We're looking at the possibility, and these are all still in the sketchy stages, I have to tell you, because some of these are like 2 or 3 years out. This is what we were just talking about. Where Director Atkins was with us, but potentially having at the Foster site 6 classrooms, which would be an additional, what's that, 90, that'd be 180. So I'm just gonna round up to about 200. So that's about 1,020 right there. And then the Fabian site currently has 1 classroom of pre-K on site, but I think they're looking to move to 3 classrooms. I'm not sure. I'm thinking 3 classrooms. So we pick up maybe about 1,500 kids. Maybe
So how do you
1,200 kids.
decide which 1,500 to pick up?
Well, we focused in the regional centers on the highest need population. Head Start population is the highest poverty population there is. So, and then 1 level above that, which is Title I. And we're locating them in the areas which have high numbers of those populations.
Okay, so when we go into that neighborhood and we locate it, how do we decide which kids get to come?
We actively look out and recruit them.
This is the Head Start wait list.
What if
Yes.
you had more kids than you could service? How do you decide?
Well, that's what we end up with, waiting list. That's what we end up with.
But I mean, you do it in who comes first?
Do you want to talk? I'll let them tell you how the recruiting process
Okay.
works. I know they came back here to just give me support, but I'm going to put them on.
I'm Deborah Berry, Deputy Director with Head Start. We have a recruitment process that the children or families are prioritized according to income, needs. Say, for instance, if they are a family from, say, have alcoholism as a problem, they are given points. And so if they have been in the program, prior children have been in the program, and so they, according to the point systems, they can have, say, roughly 100 points. And from those 100 points, everyone would not receive all of the points. So if they are a family that has mental health issues and they've been referred from an agency, they're given points. And so we have a Child Plus system that really prioritizes the families, and then families are entered into the program according to their points.
So
It's safe to say there's nowhere near the resource or the capability to serve the need that exists.
We're not going to serve all of them.
So it's basically we wait.
We have
We
a
wait
wait
it,
list.
and then we decide based on how much we can serve, and we go down that far on the
Go
list.
down the wait list.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So in the high need populations, we take the highest need in the highest need populations.
And,
Okay, here's my-
10% of our children that come into the program have special needs. We start out with 10%, and currently we have 16 or 17% of the program have special needs.
Would you repeat that again?
Currently, with the Head Start performance standards, 10% of our children have to have or enter the program at the beginning of the school year identified with special needs. That's 10% of the 804. Throughout the year, we identify additional children. So currently, we have probably about 16% of our 804 children are identified as special needs.
Well, do you get points for having special needs?
Yes. They are currently...
In other words, you got the 10% special needs?
Okay, we have the 10%, and then at the beginning, according to our priority list, 25 points, if I remember correctly, are given to children with special needs.
Okay, so you get points.
get
and then-
priority
so
points
you
for
would
that, yes.
So, but we don't have enough kids with special needs that we fill up the whole thing with kids with special needs?
No, we would always try to have a balance so that
Well,
we
but
have
I-
role models in the classroom.
But if you're giving points for special needs, and you're weighting everything on the points, then wouldn't eventually all those special need kids take over all the slots?
Well, not necessarily because of income. Some of the families that try to register into the program, they're over income. And so those families, even though they have special needs, they would not qualify for the program, or they would not be one of those prioritized because of their income.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question, and it has nothing to do with this. It has to do with the early child. Let's talk about the Common Core. You know, one of the things that's happened in the kindergarten situation, kindergarten now, because we're talking really kindergarten here too, because these are transitioning in. One of the things that's happened nationwide is they put together a Common Core kindergarten curriculum. People say, oh, it's not a curriculum, but it is, of course, because anything, if you look in the dictionary, anything you teach is a curriculum. So if you're teaching anything related to the Common Core, it's part of a curriculum, and so it is a curriculum. But there's a lot of criticism about the Common Core curriculum, not just because it was put together by people who had no experience whatsoever in kindergarten. And there wasn't anybody, 135 people who put together the Common Core, and nobody in the whole 135 people had ever taught in a classroom kindergarten through third grade, not one. So 0 people, 0 experience. So they took that Common Core curriculum for kindergarten kids, and they put it in 45 states. And then they sent that, the federal government basically did that because it was tied in. And then they said, okay, you have to, we want you to take the Common Core, we're gonna give you money. And then they sent it out to the state. And in our state, and I've been down there for 2.5 years watching them, no one vetted the programs. There was no vetting. We haven't vetted any Common Core stuff any place that has to do with that. So the state takes a totally unvetted program, so it's not vetted in the federal government, it's not vetted in the state government, and they send it down out to us for kindergarten to use and say, basically, you need to use the Common Core kindergarten program. Okay, which is totally unvetted. It's never been vetted any place by any kindergarten teachers or first grade teacher, anybody who has ever taught in those things. So I guess my question is this: how are we vetting it? Did we take, for instance, like this? Did we take something like this? This would have been a way to vet it. We take all our best. We take our best kindergarten teachers, maybe 15 or 20 of them or whatever, and we sit them down in a room and say, we want you to look at the Common Core, and we want you to tell us where the problems are. Where are the problems for kindergarten if we're going to teach the Common Core, and what do we need to do to make that work? Because I keep talking to kindergarten people, and they don't have, they're going, no, this is no good. We don't want to be doing these types of things in our kindergarten program. And the part of the deal is that has a tendency to sneak down into the other stuff, the stuff that's not very good, supposedly. So I'm curious about did we vet it, and how did we vet it? The kindergarten program from the Common Core, that kindergarten teacher after kindergarten teacher starts saying, this stinks, this is stinky stuff, we shouldn't be doing it. Okay, well, I get to talk, I guess, as much as I want if I got the microphone,
I'm curious though,
don't I?
too. So let's let her answer.
Actually, I'm going to let my colleague here answer this question, because my understanding is there's a meeting coming up to talk about this in more depth, about this very topic. So I'm deferring to Ms. Higgins.
So I don't know everything about the specific ways that we, or what actually, how you determine what vetting looks like. What I would say is that the Common Core standards are predicated on what are the outcomes that we need at the end of the system, and then how do you build down through each developmental stage and each phase the thinking skills and experiences that allow students to complete the system with a slightly different set of outcomes than we used to be targeting. So we were targeting, get your Carnegie units, make sure you've got credits in all of these things, and you should be good to go. And what we've seen over time is that the high school diploma as the target hasn't gotten us where we're going. And so, so the standards in the Common Core help us shape what we do with our curriculum. And so, but I would be happy to research this more and let you know how we've looked specifically at the kindergarten standards for you.
So the answer basically is that we haven't done real vetting of the kindergarten standards yet, because the part of the
You're
problem,
misunderstanding. You think that's what I've just said. What I
Yes.
just said was I would be more than happy to look into that and find out from our team and our teachers what we have done.
What they did do that nobody really, I mean, you don't know, and people here don't know what we vetted them, nobody knows. I mean, no, okay, all
Well, I
right,
think she
fine.
said that other people do know, Steve. She's going to
But nobody here knows, but other people do know?
Not right tonight.
I will find that out.
Okay, now, let me ask a follow-up then on that. The Common Core stuff is different in kindergarten than every place else. It's thought of differently than every place else, because it actually moves fully away from what a lot of the past things that we've done. The fifth grade Common Core, you can argue it one way or the other probably, you can do a lot of stuff with it, you can mess with it, you can say, I don't like this, I don't like that. I mean, when I looked at the sixth grade Common Core for literacy, it doesn't have much to do with a lot of the things that we used to teach, maybe in some cases, or that I've done. It's taught in front of, but the kindergarten thing evidently is different. It's almost taken this big jump in a totally different type of thing. We moved from play activities and learning through play to activities that have specifically to do with academic orientation. In fact, and it kind of leaks into the first grade. There was I saw the other day a new Pearson first grade textbook, which talks about producers, goods, and consumers. And in the first grade, seriously. I mean, and it was pictures of people, not I mean, we used to teach from this good literature, maybe, and now we're moving to that. And so it really makes me afraid that we've gone in this kindergarten direction without really sitting down with our best kindergarten teachers and saying, does this make sense for us? And we're maybe stuck with it to some degree, but how can we adjust it so it's not as damaging maybe as people think it might be? So that's all I'm saying. I'd love to have you tell me if we're good. But I'm more interested, I'm guessing we haven't done that. I'm more interested in knowing if we are going to do that with those really outstanding kindergarten teachers in our district, of which I'm sure we've got tons of them.
So, and this
Sure
may
we
be
do.
one that we want to schedule
Thank
a
you.
future conversation, because a couple things I'd throw in here, Steve. One is, as the state was doing, their committees on looking at the Common Core, we actually had PBS people who went and served on some of those committees. And secondly, when we do materials adoptions, we actually do the process that you're
Yeah, yeah,
describing.
sure, I'm
And
sure.
I don't know that we've done this grade level by grade level, looking at the Common Core standards. I don't believe we have.
But it's a different question.
Totally get you.
I'm just saying, that, it's the kindergarten that worries me. We should
Yeah,
be doing
gotcha.
it grade level by grade level, but it's the kindergarten where the destruction really gets nasty according to
And
kindergarten
we looked at
teachers.
some of what were the measures at the kindergarten level on grading cards, that some of them were really disconnected from what you're actually doing in kindergarten.
We
But
identified earlier, back in our summer
Right.
planning, that this was something we were all interested in learning
Right, and having more
about.
conversation
And
about.
having more conversation.
And
And
we're
there's
going
also
to.
the whole issue of the transition and the smarter balanced assessment and how that, what potential, so this is a really huge, important issue. So that isn't the topic right here in this presentation, so I just wanted to chime in with agreement, that we need to be talking about this, but that I'm just looking for when we're going to, I think we still need to go back and look at what are the remaining issues that we have between now and the end of the year and how we want to schedule.
But schedule
this
time
out.
and get the
Well,
right
you're-
people for the
You're
conversation.
absolutely
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
and it is on our schedule, and we will
Right.
get to it. Tonight is not the night
Right.
where we're discussing Common Core,
Right.
and staff isn't prepared with people here to
Right.
discuss
Yeah,
Common
sure.
Core.
Of course not. I just wanted to make the point.
So, we will get to it. I understand that, so, thank you very much. Others who have comments about actually the early learning centers? Director Belisle?
Hi. Just want to say, one, I'm really excited about this.
Liking this?
Two, I have two questions, and then the rest is just what I want to pull out to highlight is something that I appreciate. One is going to early learning centers could potentially increase a transition, right? It inserts another transition from pre-K into K. Can you talk to me a little bit about the plan for support? Like, there's a couple of different places we see support for pre-K to K, but can you help me understand that a little bit better?
Well, I did talk a little bit about the increase with the early kindergarten transition piece, but that actually is for those students and families who have not had access to the pre-K experience. That's right now who we're reaching. But in the regional centers, what we're planning on doing is having family support people who would actually be working with the families throughout to help with that, to help with the transition, both for the families and also to help with the transition teacher to teacher into the schools that these students would feed into. So that's part of the wraparound services. So we're consciously going to be not just doing some of the same things that we're currently doing now, but enriching them. In other words, hopefully what we would do is identify where the child might be going to kindergarten, make certain that we have some time for that transition to occur where the teachers have an opportunity to talk one-to-one on what's happened with these students, as well as time for the families to actually sit down and talk with the incoming teacher. When you have them in a space where you know where they're coming to you, it's easier to do that than when you don't know who's going to show up. So between the expansion of the early kindergarten transition and the regional centers, I'm using the Clarendon as the example, we should hopefully be able to capture most of those students in that transition and have it be more formal and the handshake be more firm than what we currently have. If it works well in the Roosevelt cluster, then definitely we would be looking at trying to expand that in the other centers as they open up.
Great, thank you for highlighting that, because I was a little concerned, because I know that even right now in our Head Start Pre-K, that transition, because you don't know where they're really going to register,
Right.
That handoff can sometimes be challenging. So
Right.
thank you for highlighting that. The second question I have is, in one of the slides that we didn't actually get to see here, but were in our materials, I noticed that it was called out for help with transition from pre-K to K, K to first, and then it skipped to 3 to 4.
Right.
And I was curious, just not understanding early education maybe as well as I could, why was there not support there for the first to second to third?
The support is going to be there. I just didn't
okay.
call it out in terms
Okay.
of my talking because of the difference. The transition from pre-K to K is are you ready to learn? The K to 1, are you ready to read? The 1 to 2, which I could have talked about, is are you actually reading? And then jumped up to the 3 to 4 to see if you're reading to learn.
Okay.
So there's still some transitions that are happening in the primary grades, but definitely we're focusing on all of the primary grades.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So some things that I just wanted to highlight that I really appreciate about this plan is, one, I really value expanding our capacity. I'm hopeful that someday the state will decide that universal pre-K is the direction we want to go, and that they will find a way to do
Absolutely.
that. And not make it at the expense of K-12 or higher ed funding.
Right.
We can do this if we find a way to reform our system of funding. Second thing is, I really wanted to express appreciation for understanding how important it is to partner, whether that's wraparound services or culturally specific or culturally targeted opportunities. It's just a really important piece, and as Director Morton pointed out, there's just such a big gap between families who have been traditionally underserved by the K-12 education system. So I really appreciate and put high value on that. I also want to acknowledge, and I'm not sure how it'll wind up rolling out, but by bringing folks together, you know, when we did high school system redesign, and when we looked at target sizes for our elementary schools, we always said that it was important to have multiple grades of one, or multiple classes of each grade.
Absolutely.
Because how important that is about, I'm struggling with this, or how do you do this? That collegial learning, and I imagine that this will improve that. I can't guarantee that, but
Definitely one of the goals.
really excited about that opportunity. And then last, I just want to say again, this seems to be a theme from the night, whether it's our great fields or whether it's our high school or our athletic program, and now with EKT, just the opportunity to leverage resources. This really is an important piece, is when you guys talk about braiding funding. It's such an important piece that we not take on all of any one, because there are great resources out there for us to be able to do this. And I really do think that our public is looking for opportunities, whether it's us building buildings or in our programming opportunities, to leverage resources. And so I just want to express appreciation for that opportunity too.
Great.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to just do one more.
Bobby?
The one thing I also want to make sure that we do as we go, and I assume that you're doing this already, is I'm assuming that as kids come through programs like this, the Early Learners Program, that we are kind of tracking their success compared to kind of a baseline. And I guess I want to make sure that that's embedded in this new investment that we would be thinking about making. So at some point, I'd like more information on how we've done it in the past, or how we plan to do it going forward.
And I'd be happy to have that conversation. Actually, that's probably something that we have not done as well as we could have potentially done it in the past. But we definitely have built that into this to have program monitoring, because that's how we're hoping to make the mid-course corrections that we need to, if something is off track, that we can make that mid-course correction. That's how we intend to do that. So absolutely, we'd be ready to have that
Sounds great.
conversation.
Thanks.
Okay.
Well, like everyone else, I'm very excited to hear about this, and thank you. I'm not going to keep you any longer. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for your presentation tonight, your passion.
And thank you for your
Yes.
questions. They help us get better. We really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
you
Thanks.
bet.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Yay.
Distributing those? Yes, please. I'll be
Okay,
I'll be
tonight,
white here for now.
last thing is our business agenda. Ms. Houston, are there any changes?
There is one change. Resolution 4891 on page 44 has been withdrawn.
4891. Okay.
Get mixed up on this, I have a comment on something that's.
So you have a comment, so that you want to make a comment, or you want to put something?
Comment on,
That one just got pulled out. This one.
no, I want to make a comment
Well, will we have, when I ask for comment, that's when you go to? Okay. 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 Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda? Director Atkins moves and Director Regan seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Ms. Houston, there is no public comment, correct? Okay. Board discussion on the business agenda. Director Buell?
Yeah, I just, we're hiring teachers and we're doing non-extensions of teachers, and we had an executive session on this. And I just had to comment that it really, it's beginning to worry me that we have the wrong template for good teaching. And it came out of reading some things when we were doing the that came out in the executive session. I think we need to really take a harder look at what our template for a good teacher is. It seems to me that we're getting lost a little bit when I keep talking to people. We're getting lost in the reform movement template. Are we assessing well, and are we doing best practices and so forth and so forth and so forth? And by overemphasizing that, we're missing the other things that are critical for teachers: creating joy in your classroom and learning, doing those types of things that for years have been what makes a good teacher, and we're moving to these other things. And it concerns me. I just wanted to throw that out so people can maybe think a little bit about that. What is our template for a good teacher? Is it one who uses proper assessment, or is it one that creates this welcoming atmosphere and the joy of learning and so forth? Which is it? I think we're kind of going with this type of assessment and stuff versus the other, and it should be a balance. We got caught in the balance thing, for instance, and we do it all the time in education. We grab something and just run with it like crazy and just drive it into the ground. Those of you who've been around a while know a little bit about phonics and whole language. And the issue around phonics and whole language was phonics people were phonics and the whole language people were whole language. But the truth is there's a balance where you meet. And we have a tendency to go way too far in one direction and another without getting that balance that really makes a good teacher. And I just thought I'd throw that out because that kept coming up in things for me. Thank you.
Superintendent Smith?
I just wanted to do a brief comment, Director Buell, about the teacher evaluation tool that was recently developed. That was actually a work team of teachers and principals over probably 18-month period. It still exists. But part of what, yeah, they used the Danielson, but they also tailored it locally for us. And part of what that was that I'm proud of, because it's the first redesign of the evaluation tool in 30 years, and it really was a conversation about what do we believe is good teaching, and how do we know it when we see it, and how are we being really clear about what that is. But it was jointly developed by teachers and principals, and teachers and principals then designed the training, and we had teachers and a principal and a teacher from each building come in and do that jointly designed training. Now, I will say that we need to continue to build on how we build a consistent understanding across the whole system, but it was a really robust kind of process.
No, I heard it was very good.
It was
My
good.
concern is that when it's coming down, sometimes it's getting forgotten.
And that I will, then it's the how do we keep it alive and how do we train?
Yeah,
But
as opposed to what are your test scores? What are you assessing in the appropriate manner? Are you always assessing? Are you using best practices? That's not what really makes a good teacher, and it's not, I'll bet you it's not what that evaluation.
And that's not what the other piece to this is there were two options about one that was using the rubric that was designed, but secondly was an alternative assessment method that after your first round of being evaluated, you could opt for that was much more portfolio based. So that Roosevelt has been piloting. So
my concern isn't so much that my concern around the evaluation system is that some people keep telling me that their principal is using it as a gotcha system as opposed to a support system.
And then that becomes part of our training issue.
Yeah, and that's a training issue. But I'm concerned about the template in general that we're doing as a whole district, kind of. What we're looking at as a whole district when I hear things, when I read things, that the template is not necessarily built around this idea of working with children as opposed to working with this systematic approach. And that's all I'm saying, that it's just something I think would be a good idea if we kind of just think about, that's all.
I think, if I can add something.
Director Martin?
I actually, thank you. I actually think it's an act of a healthy district to continue to go back and re-examine and look at what is the process that you take within your organization to evaluate your staff. So I don't know if I don't think I'm far off from what you're saying, is what do we continue to think about in terms of quality education and quality educators? And I think there's also a piece of that is how does that look different than what it has in the past? Are the demographics of the children that we're serving, the issues that they're coming to our schools with are very different. Things are changing, things are evolving. The way we learn is evolving, and how do we develop a system that allows to accommodate that kind of need within our schools? And that's, it seems like that's really in partnership with certainly not just our teachers, but our teachers included, our families and our youth and our institutions of higher education that are actually partnering with us. And Carol, I know you're engaged with a group of programs around the city that really are designed to, or at least the conversation is designed to get to the point of how do we create educators for this century. And I think that's finding an evaluation that's fair for that teacher group is going to be important as well.
So can I do one last thing of invite Andrew Davidson to give a little pitch for your testing forum?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to do that? Because that kind of feels appropriate here in the conversation we're having.
Yeah, so on March 20th, we will be having our standardized testing forum. It looks like it might be at Grant now. We're having to switch around the location, but we'll get that publicized when we actually nail it down. But we'll be having a community conversation with parents, teachers, and students, as well as anyone that wants to come about standardized testing, what it means for our community, and the role we think it should play.
And multiple perspectives. So you want to just say what the multiple perspectives are, sort of like who's going to be on the panel?
Oh, right. So we'll have some community members that have been really outspoken about standardized testing. We'll have some teachers, parents, and students. So maybe one of each.
Is there going to be any information from the state, though, since they're the ones who are?
We're hoping to have actually someone, I may have forgotten to mention this, someone from PPS who will be providing the state perspective is what we're hoping.
Oh, okay. And I thought you were doing an ODE person too, but okay.
Yeah.
That'd be better.
Yeah. We'll see if we can get that. Yeah, that's right. We'll see if we can get it.
Get the governor.
So do you have a time for that, or a time or a place?
Yeah, I think we were saying 7 o'clock.
7 p.m.?
Yeah.
And where would you hold it?
We're hoping Grant for now. I need to get that finalized.
I'm sorry, Grant High School, great.
And this is Super SAC organizing this?
Yeah, it is.
This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Andrew. Thank you very much. It's great. Did you have another comment, Director Buell?
Two follow-up comments to what Matt said. One, I'm somewhat familiar with the NAIA program, and I watch it all the time on Facebook and the stuff that he puts, and it's a wonderful program. And the other thing, and we should be doing more things in our schools like they do at NAIA. But the other thing is, you can't find a really expensive K-12 school in this country probably that teaches like the corporate reformers keep telling us to teach and the State Department keeps telling us to teach. If you go to Oregon Episcopal, St. Mary's, you go to, they just don't teach that way. We teach that way because I guess we're told to, but those schools don't. And for me, that makes a lot of sense. How come they don't teach? How come they're not pushing Common Core at Oregon Episcopal? How come they're not testing their kids into the ground at Oregon Episcopal? Because they know that's not the best way to do it, and they have so much money they can do pretty much what they want, and so they don't do what
Director
we're
Buell,
doing. There you go. Thank you.
Let's not do more Common Core. Let's wait for a later time on that.
I'm just listening.
So we're just trying to keep this. Oh, and we're all looking forward to it too. So, Director Buell, or Director Belial, sorry.
Don't apologize for that. That's quite a compliment.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that, one, I appreciate Director Buell, what you're saying, that it's not usually an either or, that there is a balance, how important it is. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness staff has had on our renewals and our non-extensions, non-renewals. And I just also want to let folks know, I thought about calling people out that I know on this list of teachers, but then I thought the list kept getting longer and longer. And I just want to say that as I look through this, I do actually read every single name that we're looking at, that we're looking to renew. And I don't mean to imply that my colleagues don't, but I just want to assure people that I do. And it's just such an honor and privilege to look at the quality staff that we have as teachers, to know the work that you're doing every single day. I just wanted to say that I recognize you in this list, and I'm excited to get to renew your contracts.
I'll second that. Okay, the board will now vote on the business agenda. Anybody else? I'm sorry, did I? No, okay. Board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. No abstentions? The business agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Davidson voting.
Yes.
Great. The next meeting of the board will be held on March 17, 2014. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Good job.
Really?